out where green. The point is, you know where green, you're dead.
He's claiming that's green. Bottle top.
Your shamrock, don't eat your cookie.
Okay, ready? Good evening, everyone. This study session of the Board of Education for March 17, 2014 is called to order. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone present and to our TV audience. This meeting is being televised live and will be replayed through the next 2 weeks. Please check the board website for replay times. This meeting is also being streamed live on our PBS TV services website. Just a notice that Director Morton is absent tonight. He's off, he's in Ecuador on a leadership program, so we're very excited for him and hope he stays safe down there on the Amazon. Okay, at this time we'll take public comment. Ms. Houston, anybody?
Yes, we
signed
have
up?
6.
Okay.
Our first 2 speakers, Greg Burrell and Dan Richardson.
Okay, while you guys are coming up, I'm going to go ahead and do the instructions for public comment. Thank you very much for taking the time to come to our board meeting. We deeply value public input, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts, reflections, and concerns. Our responsibility as a board lies in actively listening and reflecting on the thoughts and opinions of others. Guidelines for public input emphasize respect and consideration when referring to board members, staff, and other presenters. The board will not respond to any comments or questions at this time, but board or staff will follow up on various issues that are raised. Please make sure you've left your contact information, either a phone number or an email, on the sign-up sheet. Pursuant to Board Policy 1.70.012, speakers may offer objective criticism of district operations and programs, but the board will not hear complaints concerning individual district personnel. Any complaints about specific employees should be directed to the superintendent's office and will not be heard in this forum. You have a total of 3 minutes to share your comments. Please begin by stating your name and spelling your last name. For the first 2 minutes of your testimony, you'll see a green light come on. When you have 1 minute remaining, the yellow light will go on, and when your time is up, the red light will go on, and a buzzer will sound, and we ask that you conclude your comments at that time. Thank you again for being here tonight. We sincerely appreciate your input.
Okay, good evening. I'm Greg Burrell, B-U-R-R-I-L-L, and I had to come back this week because of something I said last week. I was talking about schools where I have subbed for years and suddenly have had days where I thought that kids' safety was in jeopardy and perhaps even my job. And so I mentioned Cesar Chavez. And because I mentioned them by name, I went and I talked to 2 of my favorite teachers to sub for. They had wonderful things to say about their administrators, wonderful things to say about their fellow teachers. And so I went back and I subbed there a couple of days last week and had a really good experience. During my free time, I was subbing for the ESL teacher, so I had free time. I met with the administrators and looked in classrooms to see what was going on, and overall I was impressed. I was going to go there again today, and I found out that most of the teachers were having subs all at the same time so that the teachers could do data analysis. And I'm glad that I wound up being sick and not able to go to school, because in a situation like that, the teachers' relationships with the students are what is a major part of the learning and the social interaction that goes on in the day. And so I know that no teacher and no administrator made the decision that everybody should be out of their classrooms at the same time to do training or data analysis or anything else. So I'm asking that whoever makes these decisions take into account. Perhaps you should have all the people at a certain level out on the same day. Perhaps you do training with multiple schools, but emptying the school of the personnel that have the relationships with the kids is a recipe for failure. At another school, which will remain nameless because of the things that I've heard about it and haven't yet confirmed, a weak administration tries to tell subs, oh, that's a classroom management issue, and threatens to discipline anyone that can't keep order. And so as a member of the substitute committee, I'm aware of schools where substitute teachers won't go a second time. And this is brand new. So, because like I say, I've been doing this for 9 years. And so I just wanted to bring this to your attention and hope that we can come up with a better way of dealing with training and data analysis than disrupting the kids' daily learning. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Dan Richardson, Richardson, father of Willa, first grader at Llewellyn Elementary, 31 students in a first grade class. Recently, I learned that our school will be facing staffing cuts potentially, resulting in even more large classes. In fact, some would be the largest classes in the district. Again, Llewellyn is a small, overcrowded building in a great neighborhood that supports its school. We are willing to accept creative use of our classroom space, and we all pray that no seismic activity happens in the next few years. But enough's enough. Concerned parents recently met to address class size for our students when we found out that Llewellyn would likely lose a second grade teacher next year. Fully 2/3 of the first grade parents were in attendance. Often, questions beget more questions, and through our research, we discovered that Llewellyn is a school chronically starved of resources, far more than any other comparable K-5 school in the district. In fact, Llewellyn Elementary is the lowest funded K-5 school in the district and has been at or near the bottom for the last 6 years. $4,475 per student at Llewellyn versus an average of $5,131. We would like to know why this disparity has gone on for so long and why. If Llewellyn was funded to average levels, we could have 4 additional teachers to assist in our overpopulated school. Currently, we're at 112% capacity. I'm just asking for 3. There are numerous quality studies demonstrating the importance of lower class size for early elementary years. I'm sure you're familiar with them. Even the most experienced first grade teacher is going to have trouble meeting the needs of a diverse set of learners with 31 students in their class. This has been a tough year for us. We request that Portland Public Schools fund Llewellyn Elementary at average levels for 3 years, so additional FTE can be allocated to create an effective learning environment for our children. Thank you for your consideration and for making the right choice for our students.
Thank you.
Our next 2 speakers are Dominic Lafave and Don Gavitt.
That's how we do it all the time.
Am I going first?
I said at the beginning, in the comments, I said that. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Dominic Lafave. I'm a special it's Lefave. I'm a special education teacher at Wilson High School. And I'm here tonight. It's not normally what I would do is come to the school board and talk, but I'm here to talk about budget priorities, and the main reason is, as a teacher, I really see what impacts kids, what makes education better for kids, and I just don't see those things being given the proper priority, being funded at the level that they need to be funded. We need to reduce class size. We need more teachers desperately, and the 150 teachers that we agreed to in the contract is not nearly enough. And I guess I'm still a little taken back by the whole, contract bargaining, where we brought up many things, and especially class size and caseload size, and during that time, and it seemed to get pretty much rejected out of hand. it's to me, it's outrageous. These were things the schools Portland students deserve. Was important to me. We were talking about things that impact kids' lives. You shouldn't reject this, and we were told at that time that this was the forum to talk about those things. So I'm hoping that, you've said you care about kids, and I hope that's true, because we really need to reduce class size. We need more teachers, and the classroom should be our priority. As a special education teacher, I just hope that you understand something about what that's like. We're required to do a lot. We have enormous amounts of mandates on our job, and these are coming from the federal government, the state government, and the district. And we have to do this paperwork. We have to do the assessments. It's required. We'll lose our jobs if we don't do that. It's absolutely necessary. So what happens as you increase our caseloads? We do more. We prioritize the paperwork. We have to do it. I have seen across special education teachers who have become IEP mills in our public schools. These are the kids that need the most teaching. They need direct instruction. They need care and attention from qualified educators who know the kids, and the kids thrive on relationships, as the previous speaker said. It's horrible. It's a travesty, and you need to do something about it. I want to tell you that teachers across the district are watching you. They're watching you budget, and I know that parents are too. And we need to do what's right by our kids and reduce class size, hire more teachers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Don Gavitt, Gavitte, even got it on the button. So I teach government philosophy and history at Grant High School, and I just want to tell you about the student government I advise. Excuse me. They did a survey a few months ago where they just asked the student body, if we could have it, what do we want? And they specifically were looking at different classes that people wanted. And the top two classes that the student body at Grant decided they wanted was AP Psychology and Home Economics. And one of the candid comments about the home economics class was, I am going to have massive student loans. I need to know how to make my own muffins. So we were really proud that they did that. The comments were great, but that wasn't the main point. The thing was that when you ask the students, they want more classes and more teachers as well. And let me just have a two-prong request there. One, Grant is a high school with means. We have a parent and family population that can afford to help us out a lot, and they always have. And we have hours and hours of parent contributions that make Grant a great place. Not all schools have the benefit that we do. Let's even that out in the smallest of ways by providing a literally $5,000 per high school to make sure that every high school has a student government with a budget to start off with, and not a budget that they just have to fundraise to get going. Something that the principal is available to the principal only to use for student government, and that money the students can get that data, which they can do so much more cost effectively than an outside advisor. By simply finding out what that student body needs and wants and what that community wants. And then just give us the opportunity to give it to them. let's buy those stoves, let's get those muffins going, let's dust off those AP psychology books and get a teacher in front of those kids exactly as they very professionally and with tremendous competence have asked us to do. And I'd really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you both.
Our last two speakers, Adolfo Garza and Lori Williams.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Adolfo Garza, last name Garza. I guess did I get a green light? This is my first time
It's right
speaking.
there in front of you. See right
Okay,
there you go.
sorry, it's my first time speaking
It's
here.
okay.
Like I said, my name is Adolfo Garza. I've been a kindergarten teacher for 7 years. I've been with Portland Public Schools for 8 years. I came to talk about class size. But before I do that, I wanted to introduce to you who I am. I am a student that has fallen through the cracks, but I am here till today. I didn't, when I was younger, I never thought I would be somebody. I was even told by teachers and administrators that I wouldn't amount to nothing after getting in trouble over and over and over and over again. Nobody seemed to make any kind of connection with me for some reason. Perhaps it was because nobody looked like me. Nobody spoke the same language as me. Nobody understood what my life was like outside of school. It was only a counselor that spent extra time with me after I had graduated that had pulled me back into the school system and helped me with my academic career and helped me how to apply for college. The point is, I never made any real relationships with any teachers until after I graduated. When talking about class size, that's what matters. When teachers build relationships with students. Education researchers suspect that class size reduction in early grades helps students achieve because there is a greater opportunity for individual interaction between student and teachers in small class sizes. When talking about numbers, we also need to understand that 20 students at Skyline Alameda is way different than 20 students at Woodlawn, where I work. Students need to be weighed instead of counted as a number. When students come in, they come in with various needs. Some of them have special needs. Some of them come in with IEPs. Some of them have been to pre-K. Some of them haven't been to pre-K. Some of them come with emotional and communication problems and disorders. I have students, many that have only a single mom or a single dad, or that lived with divorced parents and spend sometimes here, sometimes there. Sometimes they get along good, and sometimes they have custodial issues. I also have students with parents who are incarcerated, students whose parents are dead or missing in action due to abuse. I also have students whose parents have been deported and families who have ripped apart. We have kids who don't get a good night's sleep. We have students who are homeless. But despite these obstacles, they are expected to be ready to learn. At any given time, I'm out of time.
So, yeah, you could just
Can I
wrap
finish?
up.
In conclusion, I
sentence or
believe
two?
that in order for me to increase individual one-on-one time, teachers need smaller class sizes and class size limits that allows teachers to spend quality time teaching and establishing a lifelong positive relationship that will help these students reach higher levels of education and achieve in their academic career.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Lori Williams, W-I-L-L-I-M-S. I'm a special education teacher with PPS. I have taught for 6 years in Portland Public Schools. I have 13 years of teaching experience in both the mainstream and special ed setting. In order for you to understand workload for special ed teachers, I felt the best way to do that was to talk about my year. Last year, my position was cut. I went from a 1.0 and was unassigned 0.5. I was left scrambling looking for a position to pick up a 0.5 to stay full-time. I went on 6 interviews. I had 5 years of experience in this district. Not only am I qualified and do my job well, I did not get one of those positions. Instead, I was placed by the district at a school not of my choosing. On the opposite side of town, the furthest point from my first school, I'd had to drive half day. 0.5 one school, 0.5 at a second school. Let me tell you, it was not fun. Eating lunch in my car so I could get to school B, so I could be on the playground to do my supervision. Not enough time to get through traffic. Leaving students who needed my help in North Portland to come over to Southeast Portland. Those 2 schools had very diverse needs, and I have to tag team on what my former speaker said about students and their need. 2 very different populations, same need. Fabian School is where I was assigned, grades 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. 40% are at or below poverty. Most of my caseload were working and living in foster homes. Then my second school, high-functioning Asperger's in Southeast, teaching at Winter Haven. If I were still at those 2 schools, my caseload would now be around 60. In November, I was released from Fabian with no choice. I had to leave a great teaching staff, great students. I had no choice in the matter. Now I'm teaching at almost 60 kids at 2 schools. I'm still over 30 at my one. It's unethical. It is not right. I want to know where the special ed money goes. It doesn't come back to the student. It doesn't come back to the classroom. It certainly does not come back to the school. It's not ethical. It is not right. 1 student with 350 minutes counts as 1. 1 student with 40 minutes counts as 1. They are not equal. It is not right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of our speakers. If you make sure you leave your contact information with Ms. Houston. Thank you.
I have a comment if you let me make it.
We're going to move on to the next part of the
Okay.
budget.
Thank you. Let me make
Thank
it.
you. Right. Thank you, Steve. Okay, we're going to move on in our agenda. Over the past few months, the board's worked to establish priorities for our budget. Because of our prior commitments to add teachers, expand dual language immersion, and continue to provide programs that have proven success in raising student achievement, the unrestricted funds that we as board members have to review is small compared to our budget as a whole. Just last week, we reviewed athletics, early learning, and 10 great fields as an example. We've also been reviewing things throughout the year that Superintendent Smith will cover as well. All these things are worthy of our support. All of the things that are mentioned today are worthy of our support. Tonight, we will hear about staffing plans. Superintendent Smith, would you like to present?
I would, and I'm actually going to start with a little snippet on 10 great fields or places for sport, which was a discussion that was had at our last board meeting that I wanted to play a quick clip from. And Dan, okay.
Friday night lights will soon shine on new and improved football fields in the Portland Public School District. Last night we told you about a proposed plan to give all PPS high schools a new track and synthetic turf infield. Well, that plan passed. The night team's Catherine Cook is live at Lincoln High School tonight to show what it all means to students. Catherine?
Laurel, you are looking at it right here, a synthetic turf infield. For students that are lucky enough, like those at Lincoln, to have it, their communities have raised money for it. For everyone else, this plan puts all other high schools in Portland on a level playing field.
All right, we'll all meet at the stairs.
At Madison High School, the gates of opportunity are opening, and this is a red letter day.
Tomorrow, even better. Yeah.
Yes, things are looking up after having to look down at this.
There's never been grass here in my 4 years that I've been here. Our maintenance crew does an excellent job trying, it gets so beat up during the season that there's no way this ever recovers.
For head football coach Adam Skiles, it's an eyesore. For his players, it's an everything sore.
You're running around and your foot will get stuck in the mud and then you kind of tweak your knee or something. It's not fun.
Today is the beginning of something new for Madison and every other Portland Public High School still playing in the mud.
All PIL high schools will have a turf field here very shortly.
Last night, the school board passed a proposal ensuring every PPS high school will get a new track and turf infield. It's a $7.2 million project. $5.2 million will come from school construction tax revenue. $2 million will come from community partners like Nike and the Timbers Army. 2 years ago, Madison got a new track, but funding for a new field was a hurdle they just couldn't clear until now.
I had no words. I was just like, I'm so excited that we're going to get this turf field.
It won't just be for students.
You're going to come by on Saturdays and you're going to see youth soccer games going on, and Sundays you're going to see adult leagues, and you're going to see use on this field in this community. It's going to bring people together.
Right now, the track is closed to the public, but that too may change when the turf goes in.
I think it should, because I think we need more opportunities for people in general to be more active. It's another resource.
Either way, the grass will be greener when it's turf, and this gets put out to pasture.
No, not sad at all.
Construction is set to begin on 4 infields, including Madison's, as well as 1 track this summer. They should be good to go for next fall's sports season. Back to you.
Okay, and actually as Dan is getting me set up to do the PowerPoint on the budget, I just wanted to make that visible. This actually comes to the board next on the 31st for a vote, but this is a project that's been in the making for 10 years and has involved the City of Portland, the county, Nike, community partners at every single school, as well as a 10 Great Fields Fund that the school board set up and then did allocated on an equity basis so that we would end up being able to have playing fields across the whole district, and we're set to complete it this summer. So it's just an exciting moment, and that was nice coverage for us. So I just wanted to do an upbeat at the beginning here. Okay, so what I'm going to walk you through at this point is a 2-part staffing and preliminary budget plan, and it's a little different than how we normally do the budget. So tonight, the school staffing plan that I present to you tonight, we've actually had a board work session on staffing. We've had a district staffing team that has been looking at staffing and how we would do allocations. Much of what will be contained in the staffing plan is building on last year's district staffing team work, so we have not changed formulas. It's adding new staff in, and some of what I'll talk about is the prioritizing. The staffing in schools actually starts tomorrow. And so what I'm going to put out for you tonight is the actual staffing plan that we'll punch go on tomorrow. The new PAT contract provides the opportunity to accelerate our hiring process. So part of what we wanted to be able to take advantage of is doing that and taking advantage of the fact that that's true this year, and we'll actually be starting our staffing process 4 weeks earlier than last year this year. So I'm excited about that. Part 2 is a preliminary budget plan. So I'm going to walk you through what the rest of the budget I will propose is going to contain, but then I'm going to be engaged in listening sessions with folks, and I don't actually present the proposed budget and budget message until March 31st. So on March 31st, then I take that proposal, which I can tweak between the 17th and the 31st, so I'm still listening to people's response to what I put out tonight. And on the 31st, I then hand it over to the board. The board is then engaged in the listening session. So there are multiple points that it's still in motion, and at the end of this presentation, I'll talk you through what the next steps are till we get to an approved budget and then adopted budget. Okay, so what has gone into feeding the budget so far? Starting back in September, we did a program update on dual language immersion. Dual language immersion and expansion of that as an instructional strategy was actually something that the board passed a resolution on probably a year and a half ago. We have had a team of people working on, that's had its own engagement process, really looking and a feasibility study looking at where we would actually expand dual language immersion as a strategy. So that team came back and presented on September 16th, and recommendations are now informing the budget. We then had on December 2nd a budget prioritization exercise that the board engaged in, looking at how they would prioritize what centrally allocated funds might be directed towards. On January 21st, we then presented what we know about the 2014-15 budget forecast, so what the revenue picture looks like. On the February 12th, we had a presentation on college and career readiness, and this is another high school action team, was a multi-stakeholder team that was established actually last spring, but began its work really in earnest in the fall with the intent of informing the budget process, and they were really looking at strategies that work within our district and also looking at successful strategies in other districts. They came and presented to the board in a work session. March 3rd, we then did a work session on school staffing and really looking at what kinds of decision points there will be in prioritizing how school staffing gets allocated. And then on March 10th, we did a content session on early learning and on athletics. So these are all pieces that are giving the board the opportunity to discuss content of things that will show up as part of the budget proposal, and all of those sessions were on Channel 28 as well. So just kind of leading you through building blocks. Other community engagement that occurred prior to this point. So we did the same prioritization workshop with the Coalition of Communities of Color, with the Superintendent Student Advisory Committee, with the High School Action Team, with the Achievement Compact Advisory Committee, with the District Employee Leadership Stakeholder Team, which are the leadership of our unions and employee associations, the Dual Language Immersion Program Expansion Engagement Process that I mentioned previously, and then again with the Citizens Budget Review Committee. Okay, so this, we are in the second year of the biennium, so we know more of what's contained within the resources we have to work with, so we're not waiting for a budget number from Salem. We also have this, in this budget, the legislative special session that added funds for the second year of the biennium, so that, which it translated, the $100 million translated into $7.8 million in additional funds for Portland Public Schools. A big deal for us, given that we've been in a cutting conversation for decades. This is a big deal to end up with something that we're looking at additional funds. And then there were, in the last couple of months, the economic recovery also improved property taxes, and we had noticed that we were going to receive an additional $4.6 million. So the combination of our ending fund balance and those two additional sources of revenue coming from the state, we're looking at $20.1 million to invest, which has an assumption of taking us down to the 5% in contingency or reserve, which I'll talk more about in a moment. But that's sort of starting place in terms of resources we have to work with, which is a yay, yes. So the improved financial outlook allows us to both increase instructional time for students, sustain and build upon our existing strategies and investments, minimize disruption of teams, meaning that we aren't like doing the kind of shuffle that we have been doing as we cut and then bump between buildings and build teams and then take them apart for the coming year, which we've been doing nonstop. We have 9 schools, and I say minimize disruption rather than like not have any. We will still have schools that are impacted by a decrease in enrollment, and there are some mitigation potential within that, but there will still be schools that have drops in enrollment. When it's been a small drop, we've worked to hold it steady. If it's a significant drop, it may be that there is a reduction in staffing. So I want to be very clear as I'm talking about this that there still is the nuance of looking at ebb and flow of where our students actually showing up that will impact staffing. And then the last one is just strengthening our organizational capacity. Okay, so proposed investments, and I'm going to keep using coming back to this slide as the one that kind of marks different sections. In terms of school staffing right now, we're looking at $12.8 million going into school staffing. The additional instructional time, we're looking at the $2.55 million. We established a workload committee that I'll talk a little bit more about that has $1 million allocated. We have centrally funded supports to students in schools, $3.75 million, which gets us down to the $20.1 million that I just identified. That gets us to the contingency reserves being at 5%. And when I'm looking at the budget, I think whatever goes above that 5%, we're looking at wanting that to be something we can sustain from year to year. So people and staff that we don't want to be adding them for a year and then cutting them, I'm looking at anything that is staffing would go above that line. What will be putting forth to the board in my proposal is that we also have some one-time investments that take us down to the 4% in contingency. But again, one-time investments meaning we don't have to sustain them. So that I'm going to propose that we take ourselves to the 4% level this year and do those one-time investments of things we have put off investing in, and you'll see what that list is. Because I don't want to use dollars that have to be sustainable dollars. They will make a difference in terms of what we're doing for kids. So I'm going to do a proposal in the budget that will actually propose spending $24.85 million. So first, the school staffing, which is the $12.8 million. And school staffing, again, this the district staff, the board did a discussion in a work session, and we went to the district staffing team. Because we were in negotiations up until a minute ago, we have some processes that are shorter than they would normally be, but we're building on the work of last year, so we're not starting from scratch on these, and largely we're using formulas that have already been in place. Last year, the district staffing team put forward the desire to invest resources by school type and achievement needs, not solely by just number of students. And you heard some of this spoken to in testimony, that we need to weight based on needs of schools and students, not just count the kids. And then secondly, to provide enough time for resources to shift culture and to build capacity. So for instance, last year when we did an equity formula, we did not tinker with that and do something different this year. We basically are saying hold steady, whatever that theory is, and let us play it out and see whether it makes a difference. Last year, the equity formula largely meant you got cut less. Because you had the equity formula this year, it may mean you get a bit of a bump in terms of what adults are in a building and there to be working with kids. Okay, so specifically, the recommendation is to maintain the equity formula within the staffing ratio allocation, to maintain what we call the non-formula additions that address specific considerations that a school may have. So for instance, a split campus, any recent program changes like consolidations, any unique programs like Jefferson Dancers or Benson end up getting bumps for the kind of programs that they have that require more intensive staffing, and then to minimize disruption. So as I said, there are some places where there may have been a slight reduction in students that we aren't then doing bumping a school down, we're holding them steady. We can't do that below a certain level, however. Okay, the piece that lets us then address individual concerns that come up are we hold back what we call a set-aside or a pool of 30 FTE that aren't allocated in this first round of allocating, that allows us to then address where the actual number of students who show up are different than what the estimates were, so that we're able to respond quickly. We've already got the pool of FTE, and this is largely kindergarten where it's hard to hit it right. So we'll frequently have higher or lower numbers in kindergarten. We've got high school scheduling needs that may be that kids forecast for different numbers of classes than what we planned for, specific program challenges and other special situations. We'll do a check in the spring based on what numbers of kids actually forecast and are landing different places that we already know in the spring. We'll do another bump or influx in the fall. So that by the time, probably by October, we will have moved all the staffing that we have into the schools, but we do it so we can be responsive to where the actual students show up that may be different than what we think. So this is some of where our mitigation ability is. Okay, priorities for this year. We've looked at, we did an amendment to the budget this year that added 68 classified staff into the schools. It added another 30 teachers into the schools. Those all stay in, and we're not pulling those out and starting from scratch, so we're holding steady on those investments. As of this next year, we're looking at adding counselors. So both at elementary schools who currently do not have counselors, we'll add those to the support table. In high schools, we're looking at moving the ratio from what is right now 400 to 1 to 350 to 1, so that there's just better accessibility for kids to their counselors. And then looking with the rest of the, and that is really the one strategic add, is the add counselors, and the rest is really going to improve staffing ratios at all levels, K through 12 and special education caseloads. So with that, individual schools will get some direction saying, please pay attention to the following things. Ensure access to the core program at all grade levels. Pay attention to early literacy, so if you have the ability to do smaller class sizes at lower grades, please focus on doing that. Increase the teacher planning time in our K-5 schools, and this is something that will happen across all of our K-5 schools, and there are guidelines for that. Manage the student loads at high schools and focus on providing strong 9th grade supports. And we have different schools that have really focused on making sure special attention to 9th grade, where upper grades actually will say, okay, we can take a bigger caseload because 9th graders, we can see the difference it makes if 9th graders are truly getting everything they need. So just saying, and different support strategies, 9th grade academies, double blocking classes. So please put emphasis, because that makes a difference in a kid's entire high school experience. So the numbers, we are looking at our Portland State forecast of an increase in 314 more students in our schools, so that's what we know right now, which will increase the FTE by formula by another 19.4. And I'm showing you this because I want to be really clear that that is separate from the 150 that is part of the MOU in that we just agreed to in the teacher's contract, and then an additional 10.25 FTE that will go to sustain and increase support for focus and priority schools. So 3 different buckets of FTE going in here, and they all go into the calculation in a little bit different way. So a total of 179.65, so almost 180 FTE in the schools. The 150 PAT members specifically, the 10.25 and the 19.4 more flexibility about what the strategies are. But the 150 could be teachers, social workers, librarians, counselors, but PAT members. Okay, so the existing staffing formula, and this is tough to see, but I'll tell you the combo here is the ratio FTE that's assigned by size or number of kids, the ratio FTE that's assigned by the equity allocation, and I'll tell you a little more detail about that in a second. The school-wide support table, and that you see right down here, which is administration, counseling, secretarial, so the support that any school needs goes in a support table so that it's got some thresholds of size in it, but it becomes the things you need regardless of what size you are as a school. And then there are non-formula FTE or full-time equivalent staff that ends up making up the total FTE. So that's the general, how do we actually build out the staffing formula? Those are the ingredients that go into the staffing formula. The equity allocation, 92% of the school staffing is allocated by a ratio based on number of students, and 8%, and you heard some of the testimony speaking to this, 8% is allocated via an equity allocation through 2 different formulas. The first is 4%, which is allocated based on the number of students receiving free or reduced priced meals. Last year, we added a second 4% that's based on the number of students who meet criteria for being combined underserved, which is a state definition. The combined underserved is based on the school's number of students who meet one of the following criteria: special education eligibility, limited English proficiency, eligibility to receive free or reduced price meals, so it gets counted again, and then African American, Hispanic, Native American, or Pacific Islanders, so historically underserved racial groups. And part of this is one where what this just does is gives the opportunity to have, again, a more intensive group of adults. It's like a slight bump in the number of adults in your building. So it's not funding particular programs. It is to be determined by the school how this additional FTE is utilized. And last year, largely what this did is it meant that you got cut less. So you may not have, when we had the combination of losing title dollars and we had federal sequestration, so we had some decreases at the same time we had an increased allocation from the state. This allowed you to be feel less of the hurt of what went away with the federal dollars. This year, it actually should feel like a little bit more of an increase, so that's a great thing. Okay, so in elementary schools specifically, we will have an improved FTE for the elementary, middle, and K-8 schools that adds teaching positions. In the school-wide support, that allocation will be adjusted so that all schools, regardless of size, receive a counselor, and we have had a number of small schools that have not had a counselor at all. Every school this next year will have a counselor. The non-formula FTE, we're adjusting the allocation so that schools that were formerly getting school improvement grants or other title schools will receive additional support. And also there are some allocations to schools with unique configurations to just allow them to handle split campuses or recent consolidations, those kinds of things. Specific, and you guys, I'm so glad to just have such a group of people here for this much detail, because I am just happy to have you all getting this much detail. So the teacher contract MOU added 70 professional educators into our elementary schools, which means all schools will have at least a 0.5 counselor, which adds 4.7 FTE. Our K-5 ratio will improve from 26.9 to 1 to 25.8 to 1, which adds an additional 18.76 FTE. Our K-8 ratio will improve from 25.6 to 1 to 24 to 1 and adds 36.88 FTE. And our middle school ratio will improve from 25.25 to 1 to 24.75 to 1 and adds 5.19 FTE. And I am going to be really this specific about it because this is significant that we haven't been able to have this kind of improvement in our ratios in a really long time. So I'm celebrating each one of these in terms of feeling like we're on a right track. We have 5 schools that will receive added staffing because of their focus and priority improvement status, so that adds 7.25 FTE. And then we have priority for adding staffing that is more direction that we give to schools, and it will be the things that you already heard me mention, but I'll say it again because this is elementary specific, that will be meeting the new planning time commitment for K-5 teachers, meeting core program requirements and making sure all kids have access to core program, supporting early literacy or our 3rd grade reading milestone goal, and other strategies that are in alignment with the Successful Schools framework, including class size reduction in early grades. So that's the specific guidance that schools will get. And hang on, because I'm going to do a quick. Okay, and the schools that are getting the focus and priority are Boise, Elliott, Humboldt, Lee, King, and George. So they're either newly identified or recently losing a SIG grant, so that we're trying to hold people constant so you don't end up with you get an infusion and then you have a cliff. We're trying to do a glide path on strategies that have been successful strategies.
Would you list those again, Carol?
I would.
Are they on here?
Boise, Elliott, Humboldt, Lee, King, George, and I missed one, so I don't know what the 5th one was.
Lance?
Say it again? Yeah. So the comment up here is just to make sure people understand this. The ratio does not necessarily mean it doesn't mean class size. It means this is what's allocated to your school. Class size have a number of other different variables in terms of numbers of kids at a grade level. You know, you've got a bunch of other variables that figure into class size, but it is the ratio that we use to staff. Okay, so changes in high schools. We will improve the ratio to increase the number of teachers, and apply the equity allocation, improve the counseling ratio to be 350 students to 1 counselor, adjust the allocation so that former school improvement grant school, which is Madison in this case, will receive support, and do FTE to schools with unique programs or configurations. And that was like when I just, Jefferson Dancers, Benson, things like that. And most of those have been standard over years, so they're ones that schools know that they get. So in high school specifically, we're adding 50 professional educators to high schools. The two things I just said, the counselors adds an additional 4.25 FTE, and then the rest goes to the staffing ratio, so which goes from 25.72 to 1 to 23.65 to 1 and adds 40.52 FTE. The one school receives, so Madison, additional staff because of their priority status. And the direction for high schools is hire teachers to meet the maximum and average student load provisions and lower class sizes, expand career learning opportunities specifically. That could be home ec if you're choosing to add home ec in your school, so just take that advocacy there. Students on track in 9th grade, so really prioritizing again double blocking support classes, 9th grade academies, those things. But again, these are school-to-school conversations about that prioritizing. It's that as a system, we're trying to build our capacity to have increased career learning opportunities for kids. So we're saying do this, but then school-based decisions about what the actual things are that get added. Special education. So in special ed, we're looking at the addition of 30 FTE. And I'm going to be creating an early childhood team with this configuration of staff, improving learning center ratios, which adds another 9.5 teachers, improving the school psychologist ratio with an addition of 3.8 FTE, improving the speech pathologist ratio by adding 5.6 FTE, adding an ELL school psychologist TOSA, one full-time equivalent, an instructional specialist TOSA, one full-time equivalent, adding a class to the community transition program, which is a teacher and 4 paraeducators, an intensive skills center, adding a class with 1 teacher and 3 paraeducators. For emerging bilingual students, we're looking at maintaining the same staffing ratio and overall staffing, expanding content-based English language development from 10 pilot schools in 2013-14, and adding 10 to 20 more schools in 2014-15. We're reviewing the numbers at K-8 schools to add additional staffing in situations such as split campus, if there's less than 1 FTE serving 9 grades with multiple proficiency levels, adding 0.5 FTE at Roseway Heights for a new immersion program, and 1.5 FTE targeted native language literacy pilot programs in 2 schools. PISA, which was the Portland International program that was operating this year at Benson, had strong outcomes in the first year of operations, but still drew a smaller number of students than we had originally planned. So we're reducing staffing there by 0.5 FTE and targeting student growth over the coming year. And again, we're holding steady with the strategy here and getting good outcomes for that program in its first year. Okay, with all this addition of staff, we are also adding the capacity to both recruit and support new teachers. So recruitment, we're adding staff and funds to support the expansion of targeted recruiting, diverse hiring, doing background checks and references, and benefits management for new teacher and other employees, which is $387,000. We are also adding seven more teacher mentor positions to support the increased number of new teachers. This has been an incredibly important support for new teachers, and we are looking at, as we start new folks, we have teachers that stay with us a really long time, and helping people get a strong start in the district and feeling like they're getting the support that they need right out of the gate. Huge investment. Also for the teacher mentors, where you sign on to be a mentor for 3 years and then you're back in the classroom. The folks who signed on to do that this year are so enthusiastic about what this is doing for their practice, and they're really excited to be able to go back in and be bringing that back to the schools they go back and teach in. So this one we want to continue to grow. Okay, instructional time, $2.55 million, which is essentially extended school year, so 2 added instructional days that will be added to the calendar for all students. And then for our focus and priority schools, 2 days for professional development, which are added to reduce the impact of lost instruction on the students in their schools, because there's an increased expectation for professional development in those schools. So that's an additional 2 days for those schools. The Workload Committee, we've added $1 million that is available to the Workload Committee, which will have 5 PAT members, 5 district members. They're making recommendations to the Chief Academic Officer about specific workload situations. So this could be, you know, a full range of, but they're ones that we're saying, bring forward something that is an anomaly, that would be something that we can actually bring resolution to swiftly. And it could be something that, this would not necessarily be just FTE, it could be subs, it could be more available tests so we're not having to share these tests, it could be, there could be a number of strategies that come forward to this committee, but it goes as recommendations to the CAO so that it works in concert with those 30 balancing FTE that I talked about earlier. We don't want to end up where we're trying to solve the same problem in 2 different places, but recommendations will come here and we'll see how this goes. But $1 million for that committee to work with. And then we have our $3.75 million of centrally funded supports. In that group, we have the Regional Early Learning Center at Clarendon, which came before the board at on March 10th. It would be 6 classes in 2014-15, both pre-K and Head Start. 3 of those classes are ones that are currently located in schools that would be moving to Clarendon, and 3 would be new kids that are not currently being served by PPS. This leverages dollars from Title I, Title II, Title VII, Head Start, the Multnomah Education Service District grant funds. That totals about $1.4 million. The general fund request for staffing, operations, supplies, roughly $481 million. I mean, sorry, 1,000. Ooh, see a deal. 481,000 rather than million. Thank you. It also is at this moment looking to return funding of the Head Start director back to the general fund. It was moved over into Head Start funding for a while. This moves it back, which allows us to repurpose the money that is currently paying for the director to fund more classrooms. And then a director of early learning that will oversee all of the early learning centers that are happening both here, Foster Site, Fabian, Clarendon. And then finally, tenant improvements at Clarendon, and this will show up again on my one-time list, but it would be this dollar amount going in to get the building ready to serve kids. And this, in the current year, we've actually have the budget to do the re-roofing on Clarendon, which has been out of service for a number of years. Second in this category is the dual language immersion expansion, so adding 3 new dual language immersion programs at 4 schools, Chinese at King, Vietnamese at Roseway Heights, Spanish at James John and Sitten. Vietnamese TOSA was funded this year and will continue next year. Spanish TOSA, transportation, and this shows you the $220,000, but a net 66 because we get reimbursed from the state for 70% of our transportation costs. And then curriculum materials, again, that one I'm putting in the one-time fund. Okay, people do not get to leave when I'm doing this budget presentation. You're held captive. Okay, high school support strategies. This one we've had a number of groups who have been working really hard on identifying focused strategies that increase our successful support of students in high school. So we had the high school action team, we've had a diploma plus team that's been looking at, so we've had multiple strategist groups that have funneled forward recommendations for the budget. The ones that are on the list. So career technical education and career readiness kind of investments. So we have a college and career readiness grant from ODE that this $50,000 for the coordinator would be a match for that grant. $100,000 worth of consumables and equipment and computer labs that support this in our high schools, which is again going to show up on the one-time list. Jefferson Middle College, this is the increased cost of funding tuition at PCC for those students who are jointly enrolled at Jefferson Middle College and at Jefferson Middle College and PCC. And again, this one's been one that we've grown from freshman year. We add a year each year and have increased the what does it cost us to support kids actually doing this. So this is the addition for this year. High school acceleration strategies, in the budget amendment this year, we put in dollars to support advanced scholars at Franklin, which has been a really highly successfully locally developed strategy. That was dollars to actually continue that strategy at Franklin. This is $50,000 in addition to that to have homegrown strategies that are informed by advanced scholars, so some kind of collaboration across the three, but not looking for it to be, replicated in its entirety, just to say that the strategy has been an effective one, so to add that at Madison and Roosevelt. We're looking at $60,000 of one-time funding to build an early warning system, and this is one that is actually contracting with someone who will help us build a formal early warning system similar to what we do with academic priority students, of students that are likely to struggle. How are we identifying them, monitoring them, making sure that they're getting, but doing that system-wide, and tracking and making sure they're getting the services that they need, and again, one-time fund. We are looking at adding, is that somebody's phone? Extended responsibility for high school teacher leaders. This one is looking at adding the ability to, adding to consolidated budgets for the high schools, the ability at the comprehensive high schools to add 4, extended responsibility to do 4 teacher leaders. We have, I think it goes 4 for all the comprehensives, 4 for Benson, 3 for Jefferson, 2 for Alliance, and 1 for MLC, so that everyone with high school age students has some of this, some of these dollars. Athletics, we did a significant add in the current budget, $900,000 this year, that was primarily focused on student safety. We're looking at an add of another $500,000 in the coming year in addition to the $900,000 that is still focused on student safety, which largely means adding coaches, trainers, transportation, and it's really working to build back the supports for us to be doing a robust athletic program. Some of this is going to build the feeder programs in the middle schools. And the particular thing about this $500,000 is we're moving the dollar amount we gain from gate fees in the general fund, which right now feeds the general fund. We're now saying, okay, we'll move that amount into athletics and allow them to have, if they start to exceed this, have that feed the athletics budget rather than the general fund. So it's a baseline moment that they can start to end up being revenue generating. Next 2 are adding social workers, 1 for dropout retrieval and another one that is a high school social worker that will be matched by Multnomah County, that allows us to actually supervise other social work interns, so it allows us to expand. And then finally, AP, IB, and dual credit materials will be part of the one-time list that you'll see at the end. Okay, then there is another group of central supports to students and schools that includes AVID support and expansion. So this is really in the Roosevelt and Madison clusters where we have AVID at the, which is Advancement via Individual Determination, and really is a support program for students to be able to access more advanced courses and be college going, college ready. We're going to build this back through the cluster down into the feeder schools. Online learning, we've been building this capacity over time, and this allows us to add 1 more certified teacher to do blended learning, so really supporting kids who are doing online learning. Sun schools, and again, this one has been leveraged between the city and the county and the school districts over many years. We are losing funding for 3 sites that will where this funding will allow us to maintain those 3, but also add an additional 3 sites. And again, that's leveraged across all of our partners, so it's really 6 sites that we get for this dollar amount. We have Rosa Parks proposing to do a balanced calendar or a year-round calendar. This is what it will cost us to do that. You're going to hear more about that in the substance of the meeting today as part of the calendar presentation. Self-enhancement at Jefferson, this again was the other part of the partnership with PCC, Jefferson High School, and self-enhancement to do the wraparound service that's supporting those students doing the middle college. This is, again, we've added a year each year, so we're doing full school model, and this is the wraparound support. Care teams, this is part of our equity work and really looking at how we're building culturally responsive instruction across, in our classrooms across the district, and infrastructure for, and staffing for doing this. So a lot of this is one coordinator position, but much of that is sub-time. Adding a regional tag coordinator at English Language Arts TOSA, in translation and interpretation, adding Spanish and Oromo capacity. And then we're increasing schools' consolidated budgets by approximately 3%. This is a big deal. This is another thing that people have not seen an increase in years, and it's really the dollars that, that schools have some control over to do the things that come up at their building. Building efficiency, this is a person who is monitoring all of our automated controls for building functioning that allows us to gain the efficiencies in use of utilities and bills, and it actually pays for itself. I just put it in here because it's one of the things that we're doing that allows us to keep dollars going to the classroom. Groundskeepers, Steve Buell, please note this one. So this is adding 2 more staff for groundskeepers, and over on the one-time ads you will see equipment so that they actually have mowers to do the grounds. And I will say, when I did this morning with principals, this was the one that was like, woo! So, and then finally, our equity and public purchasing and contract policy implementation and monitoring. It's $37,000. That is the basically implementation of this policy and monitoring that people are experiencing what we're intending as it actually hits the ground. Finally, the one-time investments, and this is, again, if this list would take us down to 4% in contingency reserves. On the one-time investments, most of these you've already heard at some other section that it connected to, but the early warning system for our high school students. This is our English Language Arts and English Language Development curriculum materials, which was a budget proposal last year and was postponed because we didn't have the dollars for it. This one, $1.6 million, but proposing to actually do that adoption this year. The dual immersion curriculum materials necessary to do the dual immersion expansion. The AP, IB, and dual credit materials. Science PD, that is a finish up of some science PD, so it is actually one time this year. IT refresh, so continuing to do the refresh on our computers. The high school equipment and computer labs, specifically targeting career. The Clarendon tenant improvements, and the groundskeeping equipment. So that's the list of things that actually support much of what you saw in the people capacity, but allowing us to actually, these things allow us to actually do those things. Compensation is another piece of the budget. All of these things actually happen in our bargaining with all of our employee groups, and this year probably the most notable thing is just the fact that we will actually be doing some kind of an increase for every employee group, which has not been the case for a long time. So just to say, yay, I'm really pleased with that too. Okay, the list of things that did not make it onto the list but are in the wings in case, pending update of our local option revenue projections. And I say this because this actually gets calculated on a property by property basis, and we can guess, but we don't really know it yet. So we're holding a list of things that were on the high priority but didn't make it all the way in. This one, people are grimacing that it didn't make it in yet, so it's more IT staff to support the implementation of Synergy. An affinity group coordinator, this is part of the equity office's proposal. An additional staff person for managing our charter schools, which has grown in terms of what the demand is on that. It's a one-person department. An additional grant writer. We are having huge numbers of opportunities to respond to grants, which this is one that clearly benefits us if we're able to respond effectively and support buildings responding. Increasing our translation and interpretation services, an internal auditor, TV services, and communications and public engagement. And these are for significant processes that we are expecting to conduct and need to support if we're expecting to conduct them. So there's that list we'll come back to if in fact we have additional dollars to work with. Next steps. So Tomorrow, school staffing begins, so what I just described to you as the school staffing principals have it, we will load our the school staffing programs, and principals will start staffing their schools. That process continues on until April 4th, I believe. So that one's one that, it begins, but it goes on for a while. I will then be conducting listening sessions this next week. So PTA is hosting one on March 18th. The Citizens Budget Review Committee, I'm meeting with them on the 19th, and we're doing Andrew, a student one, on March 10th that Andrew is hosting in SuperSAC, is that right? March 20th, that Andrew is hosting, or not, the SuperSAC is hosting. On March 31st, we are back here, and I actually propose a budget, so I'm assuming much of it will look like what I've just done for you. However, it could change based on things that people contribute or say as in the next 2 weeks. Then it goes to the board, and between March 31st and May 19th, the board acts as the budget committee. So the board is our budget committee, and they include at least one public hearing. Usually they do multiples. By May 19th, the budget committee approves the budget, and then by June 23rd, the board adopts the budget. So that's the full trajectory of what happens. And I'm just going to say, you've been a very receptive audience. People mostly stayed way tuned in, and that was a whole lot of detail to be absorbing. So with that, I will pass it back to the board.
So do we have questions or comments?
You can ask questions, and some I may be able to answer, or you can give me issues that you want more on, or whatever you. Yeah. Although I'm going to tell you that you mostly have done your discussions about the substance here. You've had discussions about them.
Anybody have anything else?
Well, we just got it, so it's just one time to digest.
Right. And it, obviously isn't the last time we'll be
It isn't
discussing
the
the
last
budget.
time, yeah.
So,
Exactly.
okay.
Can we just ask a couple?
Sure, yeah.
I'm just trying to fly through what the questions were ahead.
That's what I
On
just
the school
asked.
staffing, you have on page 6, 10.25 FTE, which is sustaining and increasing support for focus and priority schools. Is that above the 8% allocation? That's something?
Yes, those are specifically ads for focus and priority schools that, yes, it goes as a non-formula ad.
And that's,
Yes.
is that specifically for 6 schools who are losing funding, or is that something
Or
else?
newly added, they become newly added focus and priority schools, yes.
So maybe at some point, can we get a list of those again, of who's
So that was the
getting
King
what,
that
or-
just went off, Madison that just went off,
Oh, okay,
George
that's what I was
that just went on, Lee that just went
Oh,
on,
okay.
and
So
Boyce
that's-
Elliott.
So those are
Humboldt,
sort of
yeah.
the ones that had 6
Yeah.
support. Okay. When I'm looking at the teacher ratios on page 8, changes in elementary schools.
Wait, which one are you on?
You mean page 8?
You mean page 8,
Okay.
not slide 8.
I'm sorry, slide 16,
Yep.
page 8.
Gotcha.
The middle school ratio improves, it seems significantly less than the K-5 or K-8 ratio. So
Correct.
can you just kind of walk us through how those were made? Or
Yes.
how those decisions were made?
Because in the K-5 and K-8s, they need to add the elementary planning time specifically, so
okay,
we had to
thank you.
give them the capacity to do the elementary planning time,
Good.
which is straightforward for some and requires the addition of electives in others. So.
Okay, that's helpful.
So, Carol, I'm really looking for next one.
Go ahead.
The question. On slide 23, just in terms of the additional for 2 days for professional development to reduce impact on focus and priority schools.
Yes.
So, so that's outside of the school year, so that means fewer days where there's, can you talk more about that?
So the focus and priority schools,
We've had that issue of that you both
Right.
need more professional development, but those are the kids who most need to have their teachers with them, so that conundrum.
yes, so what we did is give ourselves the ability within the teacher's contract to add additional professional development days for the focus and priority schools that's dependent on the budget. So
Mhm.
this year, we're saying, yes, add 2.
Okay.
And it is it up to the individual school how they schedule those days. So it could be
Okay.
that they use the teacher in-service day, which we right now do not pay for. That could be one of those days.
Okay.
It could be that they add a date at the beginning of the year.
But
Could be-
not during the regular instructional calendar?
Right, it's in
Okay.
order to preserve the instructional calendar and use that as instruction time, but still do the required professional development that is expected of focus and priority schools.
And not provided any additional funding from the
Yes.
state? I'll just say that for the many, every time I bring that up.
It also is a mechanism that if a SIG school had a grant that would allow them to afford to add another day for their school specifically, they could add the third day as an individual school. So, because we've got the ability to
Okay,
add that.
so in a number of these, you're combining support both for the schools that had that significant infusion of funding through the school improvement grant that's going away, and for focus and priority schools?
Yes.
Okay.
But this one is really targeted at preserving instructional time for
Right.
students. And this was like, I will say PAT, this was one of their things that they really advocated for as a way
Right.
that we add instructional time.
So, on slide number 26 on page 13 for early learners.
Slide number what?
26,
Yep.
page 13. I guess I'm still struggling to understand the early learner funding piece and what comes out of the general fund, or how that's funded, because I think our general fund typically is for K-12 students, so I'm still struggling to understand this piece. Can you get into that a little bit better with us?
So Harriet probably did a more complex job than I will be able to do for you. This is part of why we showed you all the streams that it funds. So Head Start is some of the funding for it. Title is some of the funding for it.
But it looked
Title
like you were
VII.
taking some out of title funding and wanting it to be funded out of the general fund.
We are, so we're taking something out of Head Start, so I'm asking to move the, the director, who previously was a general funded position that we moved. Is Harriet there? Come on up, Harriet, come on up and answer these questions. Of moving that person back to the general fund, so it allows us to pay for classrooms out of Head Start. So come on up, Harriet, this is.
Hi, Harriet.
And actually, I'm going to give you my slide on this so you can see what was up right here.
So Harriet, I was specifically asking about early learners budget. So we want to return funding of Head Start director to the general fund, so take that out of the Head Start fund, and we want to pay for a director of early learning. So that's $320,000 between those two. So I guess I'm still trying to understand whether we are basically using K-12 funding to pay for pre-K.
Okay. What you're doing with the Director of Early Learners is not just for pre-K. It's overseeing things like the early kindergarten transition program. It's the move to full-day K. Basically overseeing all of these programs that we're getting ready to start. So that's actually overseeing those programs. That's the role of that director. The Head Start directors used to be paid out of general funds. And then when the money got tight in the general fund, and there was more money in the federal dollars, in the days when all the money with all the A's, that's how I always reference it, came about, we shifted the Head Start directors into the federal dollars and freed, so that they had money to be able to continue the same amount of services to the Head Start program, even though so that they didn't get a cost of living increase for Head Start. So what they did was they moved the Head Start directors out of general fund into the Head Start dollars. That allowed us to be able to have some flexibility with the Title I money. I mean, it was just, there's so many different pots that pay for this, that we were able to then have the cost of living increase that the teachers got in the salary, but we didn't get in the federal dollars that were allocated to us. So now what we're trying to do is recoup all of the above. So now that we have an increase in the general fund dollars, we'd like to move the administrative cost of Head Start out, because Head Start dollars typically in Portland have always only paid for classroom. They pay for educational assistants, they pay for the community, the wraparound services, they pay for the teachers, they pay for the snacks. They were not paying for the administrative oversight until about 3 to 4 years ago.
And is the Director of Early Learning a new position altogether?
It's a new position.
And this we're actually saying is part of how we're supporting our early literacy and really supporting kids' readiness for school. I mean, this is part of a statewide and countywide emphasis on really preparing kids to be ready for school. And is replicated in our program at the Ramona, that will be at Fabian, it will be at the that part of what, so these are all connected. The early kindergarten transition, how are we getting kids during the summer prior to kindergarten? So we've got numbers of programs that become part of this same effort.
And right now you have multiple people who have jobs that are not necessarily designated for that, who are doing that work. And you just want to make sure that you have a coordinated and aligned program. So you need to have somebody whose job it is to make certain that all the pieces fit together. And that's what the Director of Early Learning would do.
Okay. I have a bunch more questions, but why doesn't somebody else go forward?
Because I'm a bit confused. Is the 481,000 general fund money?
41,000?
481,000 for staffing
Yes.
operations?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So that's coming from the general fund?
Yes.
Okay. So
the 1.4
Bobby,
million.
does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I guess that
the 1.4 million up above is what's leveraged with that, with the other funding sources.
Okay.
But the number that you're seeing on the, that's a general fund number. And yes, can you do are those dollars that really are K through 12 dollars that we're now using for pre-K? Yes. But we are doing that. I mean, we are doing that. And we have been doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a question?
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to ask?
Sure.
Okay.
We have two things on community engagement, and we have next steps. So that's page 2 and page 17. Community engagement, we do have the district employee leadership stakeholder team, but I don't see anything that really focuses in on teachers themselves. And then when we get back to the next steps, we have superintendent listening sessions, PTA's, the Citizen Budget Review Committee, Super SAC, but there's no listening session for teachers or employees. I'd just like to suggest maybe that we should have a listening session for the teachers themselves where they could come and ask questions, since they're the ones who really know probably the best. That's one comment. And I gotta go through my notes here, sorry. On the school staffing, which is on page 6 at the top, are all 100, is it R6?
Slide 11. Page 6, slide 11.
Yeah, I'm, okay, thank you. I can almost read that 11.
Oh, no.
Pretty close. Don't have those young eyes like Greg. Yeah, I have mine, but I look bad on TV with them. Are all 150 kids, are all 150 staff that we're going to add working directly with students?
Yes, they're all PA team members, and so what they can be, teachers, librarians, counselors, social workers, and working directly with kids.
TOSAs
So they're not TOSAs in this. So like when I'm doing the teacher mentor, that's not in that group.
Okay, no TOSAs in the one.
No,
it's
it's
nothing
50.
against TOSAs, but
So
okay, I'm just checking that out.
Those you saw show up in the central supports for schools, students in schools, TOSAs.
On page 8, slide, looks like 16, it says support third grade reading milestone goal.
Early literacy.
So what
early
does that,
literacy.
what does that actually mean?
So it could mean that it's looking at prioritizing lower class sizes in your early grades. It could be an instructional specialist that's focusing with your early grade teachers. It's school specific, a reading specialist who's doing individual groups with kids. So different schools are going to prioritize that in a different way, but one of our big priorities as a district is getting 100%, and as an achievement compact advisory committee is getting 100% of our kids reading and reading to learn by third grade. So So things that you would prioritize, like we've prioritized kindergarten class sizes staying 25 or less, and that's the one place we actually have named a class size, or said if you go above 25, then we'll add a educational EA if we don't have another classroom, or if you have just, it doesn't make sense to, you have a couple kids over 25. But it's a school-based decision, exactly.
Could literacy coaches be involved in that?
Yep. School-based decision, but yep.
Yeah. Number 9, page 9, number 18, slide 18.
Yep.
It says staffing ratio from 25 to 23, so we're dropping 2 in the high schools.
Yep.
And we're dropping less than that in the grade schools.
Yep.
And is that because of the 130-hour stuff that we're trying to wrestle with? Or is that because of, we think the high school kids are more important than the little kids? Or,
We have
how
multiple
does this
things we're working on with high schools that are compliance parameters. So we have an arbitration that limits the student load to 180, and an average student load that is like 134, and we have the 130 class. Yeah, so we have a number of parameters. We're trying to meet with that one. That is part of why we've got that investment at high school.
Well, if they're telling us that we have to do this at high school, and we've got first grades at 32 or 33, are we handling, because if we're going to go generalized class size reduction, which is what this looks to me like it is, I have no problem with it, but on a generalized class size approach, you can drop a kid every place and still end up with 34 kids, 33 kids in a first grade. And is that only the $1 million for the MOU, for the Workload Committee that's going to deal with that? Or are we dealing with, we have 30 more FTE that's dealing with that, that's the other 30 FTE? Will that get all our first grade class sizes down to anywhere near 30? Have we projected that?
So, so the kindergarten is the main one we've actually put a number on.
Right.
Other than that, it really ends up being variation school to school by like what the grade configurations are.
Right.
If we have, we will invariably have something that ends up being a bubble that's working its way through a school, that you'll see something weird. We had some this last year where we'd end up with like my class, and it was weird. It was unusual in the system. This would let us deal with something unusual in the system, that somebody could come forward and say, like, I'm way out of whack to everybody else because I've got this bubble of kids coming through. So this could let us deal with that. The 30 FTE, so we've got 2 mechanisms, the 30 and the 1 million, that would be things that we can mitigate anomalies, but we're basically working to adjust our staffing ratio every time we have the ability to adjust our staffing ratio, which is what you see us doing here.
So does this,
across the system,
when we're doing the across the system, does this end up with how big a variable do we end up with on something like a first grade? If we got ones up to 33, when we're all done doing the 30 FTE and adjustment from the PAT Workload Committee, and we have 20, do we get down to, do we go 18 to 33, or what it seems like we would direct a little more money at that variable problem as opposed to everybody down, and I just was wondering how we've thought about that.
So that's part of the conversation that happens between the regional administrators and the principals. Once we have actual kids and we're beyond the estimates and we actually have students who show up, then the regional administrators and the principals are working on how do they deal with the individual situations at each school. We actually we do get a printout, it's like this VAT of class by class, number by number, that at a certain point in the year that I'll be happy to provide for you, so you can actually take a look at it, because I
think everybody out here would probably like that.
We have provided
about that
it
for months now.
Yeah, so anyway, yeah.
So you could give me that?
There's a certain point in the staffing process that I will be able to give you that.
Okay,
yeah.
that would be great if you would, and then I can get another 200 emails in from the last time. What about on the special ed section, that's page 10, number 19. slide 19 for you, Greg. We got ELL school psychologist, TOSA, where there's 2 TOSAs there. How do we decide to put in a TOSA there instead of an actual school psychologist?
So, and
I mean,
I'm
do those
looking-
school psychologists need somebody to tell them what to do, or what?
Hang on one second. I'm looking to see if Melissa or Mary are here to do a little more. Thanks, Melissa.
There's 2 there. Did you see them both, Melissa? Oh.
Actually, here.
Instructional specialist, TOSA, and a ELL school psychologist, TOSA. Did the TOSAs work directly with children?
No, the TOSAs don't
I
work
didn't think so,
directly
okay.
with children.
All right,
So,
I didn't think so.
and I think I heard you ask, however, why not a
How do we
school
decide to do that
psychologist?
instead of putting an actual person that's working with kids?
Yeah, so-
What's the decision-making process we use there?
So we did add to the school psychologist as well as part of the add backs. In this case, it's providing support to those professionals who don't have someone to pick up the phone, come out and coach them out at their site, help them problem solve with students or support teachers in a different way. So that's what TOSAs do, and that's what each of these positions for the respective special programs is for.
So we think that's more valuable than an actual school psychologist who works with children. That's how we've prioritized that, evidently, because that's what we've come up
I
with.
think what we've prioritized there is having school psychologists have somebody that they're able to call and provide them with support specific to their craft.
So they haven't
that's
had, we
what
haven't
that
had somebody over the school psychologist who works with them like that before?
Not in a TOSA capacity, no.
But in an administrative capacity?
Yeah, so that's a supervisory capacity, and as you know, that's a pretty different relationship than a TOSA capacity, which is providing coaching as a peer.
Okay, thank you very much. Slide number 20, page 10. Thank you, Ms. Goff.
Thanks, Melissa.
This is the Benson program with the kids who came in.
International students.
Now, I talked for a long time, and I talked...
Hang on just a second. Vun?
I talked to Sue Ann Higgins, who's sick today, about a program that does 450 hours of intensive English instruction and then has a different, over an 18-week period. And so maybe a kid might only need 300 hours or something, but it's very difficult to get into a classroom and actually do work if you don't have the English instruction that allows you to do that. And we average, it appears to me, about 90, the best I can make out, we average about 90 hours a year per kid. Half an hour is the minimum state, which is what we meet. And so if you need about 450 hours of English instruction to be able to actually get into a classroom, and it's probably a little more than that, we have all sorts of kids that, so if you come in at the beginning of the 8th grade, you get that 450 hours of intense English language instruction that allows you to get into your classes when you walk across the podium, you walk across the stage when you graduate, because 90, 90, 90, 90, that's 5 years. And we only have 10 kids in this. We should have a couple hundred kids at least in this. And with 4 teachers, well, what they have, four original, I think they have 4 FTE or something out there, and what, 10 kids or something? I haven't been over there to look, so I don't know. But I'm still making a comment.
Still
Thank you.
on the runway to the question.
And so what I'm wondering is, can we beef that up?
So here's and I'm going to let Vun speak to the success of the program this year. This was its first year, and it hasn't grown as much as we thought it would grow this year, but we're committing to how do we grow it, because it's been successful for the kids who've been in it. So
I have some
Vun.
real ideas on how to do that.
Vun, you want to speak to PISA?
Yes, good evening. PISA has been very successful this year, and I agree that we need to increase the number and enrollment in the program, and that's absolutely our goal. But right now, PISA is not a mandatory program, it's a choice. So when a student comes to Portland Public School as level 1 proficiency, they get a choice of attending their neighborhood schools or attend PISA. And so that's the choices that the students and the family makes, which are the same as any other families who has the choice, the choice to make the choose that they want to be at. So far, we have 21 students from 12 different language groups, and all of the students who has been enrolled in starting beginning school year has earned 4 credits for first semesters. And some of them even earn 2 credits in math because we do proficiency-based and also computer-based program. So also the proficiency English level has improved tremendously because that's really what we focus on is that English proficiency. So far the data that PISA produces is really overwhelming comparing to the neighborhood school because they're so intense and they're in the small groups. Did that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Well, yes, I think you answered part of that question. So if I'm a kid and I come in from Mali, what do you speak in Mali? Anybody know what language? Not sure. But if I'm a kid and I come in from Mali and I'm 13 years old and I'm starting the 8th grade, we say to and the family comes over and here's a kid who's been in refugee camps, and I mean they're having a lot of trouble in Mali. So we're going to start getting some kids. We always do. All you can do is look around the world and we get those kids. Of course, you know that. And we ask them, what do you want to do? I mean, why don't we put him in where we think he needs to be? I don't understand why we would ask his family and him, who's never been involved in American education ever, and maybe never even been in school, we ask him, where do you want to go? And by putting him out someplace in the building and we have to meet his needs or her needs, why wouldn't we put him into this program where we have the people there to meet their needs, and if you go about 18 weeks in this program, then you can end up going out with a lot less problem throughout the system. I mean, I don't understand why we would choose that. Maybe you could, you don't have to answer that now, but I just want to make a comment on it.
I think first of all that we do not have 8th grade right now, but if we do, we would like to extend it to 8th grade if we have resources to allow us to do so. But also that we cannot make student go to certain school because it's office civil rights. That's their right to attend the school. We cannot make them attend to a school that they don't want to go to, and that would be a violation of their rights.
So if we said to a student, look, it's 100 times better for you if you go to this school. You can go here, but you're not going to get hardly any help, or you're going to go here and you're going to get all sorts of help. We're going to really help you get, and you're going to be able to get that English language, and you're going to be then in 18 weeks be able to come out and maybe do some things in the school, and the kid would say, nah, I want to go over here to, it doesn't make, okay.
Yeah.
And we'd say, well, okay, we don't, okay. Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Okay, page
Thank you,
11.
Okay, thank you.
Somebody else has questions and we'll come back.
Okay, that's fine.
So I have one question on the general fund FTE allocation. So I don't know if folks in the audience have this or not, but I see it here. So this is talking about school-wide support at the high school level. And clearly we differentiate school support in some areas in terms of administrative support based on the number of students that we're serving. So the vice principal allocation might change, or the secretary allocation might change. The counselor allocation we're clearly doing on a counselor to student ratio. So when I look at the next 6 or 7 boxes, it seems like we're just doing a standard formula, an equal formula across the board, regardless of how many students we have. And so I guess I want to ask if we've looked at that of late, and in particular, when I see something like IT staff, and I'm sure every high school would tell you that they need more IT staff, but you have one school that has 564 students and you have another school that has 1,500. When you're looking at IT support of a half-time IT person, How does that make sense when you have a third less students almost? Why wouldn't we do that allocation based a little bit more on your population of students or how many computers you're supporting in that particular building?
So I'm going to just say Sarah Singer has been the lead on our district staffing team and has been totally in working our formulas. So Sarah, thank you.
Same with like bookkeeper. Same with like bookkeeper. Everybody gets a quarter of a bookkeeper, but when you have, yeah, I have no idea. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, so I think it's a really good question, and I think if you look at the discretionary support column, that is differentiated by size. So a school like Lincoln does have sort of the highest amount of FTE there in comparison to a smaller size school. So I think the intent was that every school we know has these things at a bare minimum. We don't want to dictate to schools every position they must have in school-wide support, but we want to dictate some positions that we know they all have, and so that's
everybody has a minimum at least.
It's a floor,
and then there's the discretionary on top of it.
That is correct.
That you can build the thing that you need.
That's correct.
Okay,
So they can add to.
great. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
And I just wanted to point out, I mean, just the hard part in this, as we're going to see, we already heard tonight, I think one comment from one school, just in terms of where there was an enrollment drop, there are, there's going to be some FTE cuts because there are fewer students in the building, and that's going to be really hard when, and we saw some of this last year too, where we had, as you were talking about, Carol, the mix of, lower cuts doesn't feel like a good thing, but it really, anyway. So now we're going to have a situation where, by and large, this is, great news and some really exciting reinvestments, but where there are fewer students, there's going to, so by and large, and although again, it could be affected by the equity formula. So, but
Well, and there are 9 schools that will be in that position, and again, those will be conversations they have with their RAs, so there could be
The
other
regional
things that are
administrators.
mitigating circumstances, or,
Right.
and you again see enrollment shifts between
bless you.
spring and fall. So these also could be enrollments that shift
Right.
between here and the time school actually starts.
And so again, in terms of so there's the new workload committee with PAT collaboratively, as well as the set aside that we've always had. So again, and potentially some of these situations where if you did end up as a result of that having a really hugely large lower grade classroom, for example.
Those are
potentially.
exactly the things. So like
Yeah.
the 30 is all about how our actual enrollment's different than projected or estimates, and then anomalies in the system that that then the RA and the principal work out, this is what's going on in my building, I absolutely can't meet this core program requirement. So like we've done solutions in moments where we've had in the K-8s, middle grades that are too small to end up with algebra available to every kid, where we'll do an itinerant algebra person who's shared between multiple schools in order to solve that. So it depends on what the issues are that we're trying to figure out how we solve. Those are the pools of FTE that are available to solve them.
Yep, you're up. I already asked the others.
Let's look at page 12, slide 24. This is the workload committee, and what you said it's going to handle specific workload situations.
That's what
Now-
this dollar amount is for.
Okay, and then if the workload committee makes a suggestion for where to spend the 1 million, it's going to still go to the
CAO.
administrator, who will then decide if that's a good suggestion or not.
It's that, so the committee will make recommendations to the chief academic officer, who also is working with the regional administrators with the 30 set-aside FTE, and part of that is so that you've got a coordinated response to the different kinds of problems being solved there. And part 2, the discussion we had during contract negotiations when we were establishing the workload committee, is you could end up with a world of workload issues that is bigger than the 1 million, where the committee itself didn't want to feel like, okay, now we have the expectation and they're the ones who are getting blamed for not being able to solve the issues. They're going to identify them, they're going to think about what the problems are, but they're going to recommend it, and we have here's the designated amount of money we have to solve them. It then becomes they're not the ones finally holding the bag, saying, okay, no, 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 to the things we can't address. We're the ones still, you know, having to, I'm the one really who will end up having to say, this is the amount of money.
When your language is specific workload situations, can they pretty much go wherever they want? I mean, is that what we're saying? I mean, for
What do you
instance,
mean?
you got some school I've heard about that does color code. You have to turn in your lesson plans, all the teachers in school, and color code them. All
Okay,
right,
so-
well, maybe decide, well, okay, you got to turn them all in, but you don't have to color code them. That saves you time. Can we do that? I mean, can this workload committee say, no, we're not going to, we're going to suggest, doesn't have anything to do with money, but we're going to suggest that you don't require lesson plans of people at any of our schools, and you certainly don't color code them?
So here's
Can they go that direction, do you think?
There's two charges to the workload committee. One is the specific situations that occur that we're looking for some kind of immediate resolution to, so they don't become chronic and they don't
Right.
become legendary, this one thing that we then think is systemic when it really is one classroom, because we can go in and solve it. So that's one set of. The other is to identify workload issues that are more systemic, which may become recommendations for the next budget cycle. This is one we're seeing, you know, this is chronic, this is one that's, you know, we really need to put a priority on this. And really looking at what constitute workload issues. So we said one of the things we want this committee to grapple with is what are the workload issues? What are things that are an initiative, but then they become part of your ongoing practice? So when does it stop becoming an initiative and start becoming, this is how we do what we do? Are there things when you add them that you let go of something else? So there's a bunch of things, and we actually identified a number of issues that we're aware of right now that we said this would be the right committee to take it on and think about it and give recommendations
But
to
if
it.
some teacher in that committee said, we ought to look at this, then they can
The
discuss that.
committee will discuss what
Okay,
its, you
good.
know,
That was just
relative value is, yeah.
Putting that up in the, we've got the early learning person in charge of those 3 schools, and we have that person, Director of Early Learning, at $160,000 a year. I assume that includes benefits and everything else.
It's a
But
fully loaded
what do you
position,
make
but
for
I
a
don't
salary
know.
to get up to $160,000 a year for benefits? It seems, I don't know, maybe I can apply.
Go,
You couldn't be on the
sign
board
on
anymore.
up there. I know.
Oh, I don't know. Some people kind of get away with doing some of that stuff. In fact, I'm hired, right?
There you go.
I'm hired and out of here. There you go. I don't know anything hardly at all about early learning, but
So-
that was, so what's the answer to that?
And you know what, I may need Harriet to come on up here too, because I don't, or David.
So while they're
The
coming
early
up,
learning director, what is the salary and benefit thing there?
So we have, Steve, we have several other things on the agenda and people who are here to speak, and we're already 20 minutes over. So if you could pick a couple that you are most important, and then
just real quick.
do the rest of them offline.
How do you
with
want to do
staff.
offline?
Well, you can just speak with
Superintendent
the
and I?
superintendent or one of her
Happy to.
designees that could answer your questions.
Actually, Steve, if anyone who has questions,
Sure.
just to CC the rest of us, and then we're aware, and then we aren't duplicating the same questions, and we're
Doing
aware
it offline,
of, hear
it's
each other's
very hard to-
questions.
I don't have them as questions like that. It's very hard. It takes a lot of time.
Well, this
to
is
put 'em
really a
like that.
question time, not comments. This is for questions right now because we do have a lot of other things on the agenda and guests who are waiting to speak, so.
Generally, the
This is a
comment,
question
if you
time.
don't make a comment, it's very hard to put your question in context. And
Okay.
so I like to ask the questions in context, is why I make comments on
And
top
that-
of the question.
The
That's
question
just
on the
great.
table.
Pretty good idea, I think.
Let's just move ahead, though.
Director of Early Learning, how is this salary calculated? The 160?
So the 160 is not a salary. The 160 is salaries and benefits. There's a salary scale, and the midpoint of that salary scale is what we budget with a new position. The midpoint of the salary scale is somewhere around $112,000, and the other money is the benefits that go with that.
Well,
So
just-
it's PERS, it's FICA, it's health insurance and benefits.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, guys.
So you want, what you're telling me is you want me to park these questions and maybe I can sit down with the superintendent to answer them?
No,
Is that what you're saying?
What I'd like to happen, so that we can move ahead, is if anybody on the board has questions, especially if you've asked quite a few already, if you could just go ahead and, I think Ruth's idea of having us go ahead and write those out so that everybody on the board can hear your question, and then we'll all get the same answer, because that's really why we meet like this, so that we can hear each other's questions get the answers at the same time and not have to ask the same questions of the staff over and over again. So, but go ahead, a couple more.
No,
and-
that's okay. No, that's fine.
You okay?
I'm not going to write them out and send them to you, though I will sit down with the superintendent and ask them. If someone wants to call me on the phone, I'll be glad to tell you what they are if you really want to know that, ma'am. More than happy to do that.
Okay.
I do have a question. Couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
See if I have anything else important now.
Carol, two questions on this particular topic is you've gone from 400 to 350 in terms of counselors ratio. The recommendation is 300. How many more FTE would it take to get to 300? I guess is.
Hey, Sarah, to get to the 300, it was like, was it 7 FTE? 7 FTE?
So it's three additional
Three more
FTE.
FTE, yeah. And
And-
part of this one is the tension around that we need, in order to meet our, like, we need to be on a glide path in terms of student load that requires us to really have people in teaching classes. So like that was the sweet spot of both knowing we wanted to add to the counselor ratio and we need the positions to be applied as teachers.
Plus the
So-
high school action team, I think that it was really compelling around the early warning system and really adding some of those
Social workers.
social
Social
workers
workers.
and attendance, and tracking that. Anyway, but I can see that you're weighing how to.
Well, and
get
those
the
we
right
took,
mix.
those are not part of the 150 though. So
Oh,
like
yeah,
the
sorry.
counselors would be coming out of the 50 PAT members going to high schools. The social workers we're doing as part of centrally supported positions as opposed to in lieu of. But
Yeah, I
yes,
guess
could
I-
you pull three more teachers and have them be counselors and get us to the 1 to 300? Yes, could.
And so then why aren't we? If it's a really
So
effective
that's
thing
what
to do.
I,
And
so this is what I'm telling you, is
Yeah.
that, so in order to do the number of teachers, to actually have the student loads in classes that we're required to have, we need to maximize the number of people we have in those roles as teachers. So, and that's part of where we were just trying to, again, it's all sweet spots. And how
Yeah.
did we both
Yeah.
make progress toward the 1 to 300, but also maximize teaching capacity and class size, which we heard as a huge issue and concern.
Right. Okay, and then on page 15 and slide 29, these this is all new added revenue to what we're doing existing. Or is this?
Wait, where are you now?
Slide 29, page 15.
Sorry, I've got some.
So was this meant to depict additional money that we're putting into these programs, or is this the total amount of money for these programs?
Right here. This, for the central support, this is in it, so part of the 3.75 in central support, that is the things that we are adding this year. So like, I'm considering what we're doing right now is the baseline. We didn't take apart our baseline, so the things
Okay.
you see on this list are in addition to things we're doing right now.
Got it. That's
Yeah.
what
Is that
I
the
thought.
question?
That was, yeah, just confirming that. So
Yeah.
Appreciate that. And then the last question that I have is, maybe you could just talk a little bit about the need for additional, the 387 on page 11, 387,000 for capacity to recruit new teachers. So, and talk about, I guess, our existing capacity and.
So we have cut our HR department significantly in recent years. It was one of the, we've done central cuts, like significant central cuts, in order to maintain when we were in cutting mode. If we're adding what we've got on here, like 180 teachers, the number of people you interview in order to hire 180 teachers is significant. And if we're really looking to recruit diverse candidates, means we're traveling other places to try and invite people to come apply at Portland Public Schools. And so part of what it takes both to do the interview process, the screening, the recruitment, the background checks, the the technical work it takes to actually bring on new hires and to do the onboarding and the training and the support to retain those new hires. It is intensive work for our Human Resources Department, so this is adding the capacity for us to do that. And actually some of these people I will add now in order to actually be present for the kind of recruitment. Like, this is a large number of people, because we will also have what is our normal turnover in a given year. So I mean, we're looking at a really significant number of people we're hiring, and it's a 30-year investment. So you have people that come into Portland Public Schools and stay for their entire career. It matters that we do a good job hiring people and that we're able to really be timely and turn around and do the right kind of outreach and recruitment. So that's what it is. That's what it's for.
How many FTE is that?
You know, hang on one second and I can tell you. It is, what page am I on again?
Page 11, slide
It's page
21.
11, sorry, 21.
Here comes
Oh, good, Sean, thank you. Sean Murray, who's our Chief Human Resources Officer. Thanks, Sean.
Good evening, board members. Within the budget package, it calls for 4 additional FTEs. As Superintendent Smith stated, just looking at the 5-year projection in regards to retirement trends, we average about 200 retirements a year. So if you take that 200 plus the 150 positions that we're adding on, we're recruiting for at least 350 teaching positions. And it's going to take quite a bit of resources in order to track and retain those candidates.
It is a big group. It's exciting and it's a big group.
Yes.
Yep.
Yay! Go get it. Go get the job done.
Go get it.
In terms of the money that's going into high schools for career learning, it seems that that's optional.
It seems like it's what?
That it's optional for.
Meaning in terms of the direction to high school for as part of the staffing process?
Yeah, or you just
No.
do you just talk softly and carry a large stick?
No, it's that, okay, so there's two different things. So like the counselors, where we're actually adding counselors to the school support table, like we're going to go in and place those. High schools are all going to receive a different amount of FTE, and they all have really different kinds of programs. What we're saying to every high school is put priority on, and this is, again, the regional administrator and the high school principals will work on what it looks like in each high school. So it's, yes, it's directive in that we're saying what we want as a system is to expand our career learning opportunities, but what it looks like in your school is going to be different school to school. So we're not being prescriptive about add X, but we're saying expand career learning in a way it makes sense in your school, because that's something we're trying to increase as a system. And same with the 9th grade. Each one of our high schools has had really different strategies. Like we've consistently done 9th grade academies across all of them. How every school makes that work, really different. Who's doing what kind of double blocking and how that works in their day looks different. So like, but we're saying do the things that help you, whatever your strategies are, focus on those for 9th grade success. So those are the 2 things we're calling out, and otherwise it's, you know, the schools get to figure out the things that make sense for them.
You've also got on slide 28 the high school support strategies with specific CTE investments there.
Which are centrally supported. So you got both the strategies happening at the school, and you've got the centrally supported strategies.
Plus we just got some big grants.
Plus we just got 2 big grants from the state, one that was Benson specific and one that was system-wide. Yay.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
And
So
some of these,
for me, just understanding, which I'm
Yeah.
not going to do now because it takes so much time, but.
Well, but some of this stuff is in order to, like when we're doing the grants, we're also doing the things that are our pieces of the grant, that are our matches to the grant, that is how we make the whole thing work and how we're able to leverage the external resources.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Thank you.
Bobby, did you say you had one more question?
Yeah, thank you. Just in terms of, so first of all, this is incredibly exciting.
know.
I
Good.
mean, it's just so nice to be working on a budget where we're not cutting.
Oh my God.
We're
Isn't
cutting
it?
days, we're cutting
Oh my
yeah, it
God.
just
Woo!
feels
Woo!
completely, feels completely different, so
Yeah.
thank you. Additions if resources allow. You didn't mention the ombudsman. Do we already have that
We
in this
added
budget?
that in the budget amendment, and we're in the hiring process for that
Okay.
right now. So that, and anything we added in this amendment is carrying forward. So
Okay.
we also, I will say, so other significant things we added in the amendment, some of which are just in the process, so you don't feel them yet, because we haven't actually hired the people yet, but we added somebody to coordinate discipline. We added an ad for increasing restorative justice. We added the ombudsman. Anyway, those things will be ones that we're then continuing on. We added the 68 classified staff, which I was really careful to call out, because people's needing to know that we're going to continue those things. We're going to continue those things, yeah.
So the two I just wanted to highlight under additions if resources allow is, one is the grant writer. We have been really successful of late. You talked about the energy efficiency position would pay for
Pay for
itself.
itself.
It strikes me that that one would likely pay for itself
does.
too. It comes out of different budgets, but it
Yep.
would probably be a really smart place for us to be thinking about. And the other question I had was just about the internal auditor. Is this in addition to what the school board already has?
Yeah, this is more about our own ability to follow up on internal things requiring internal audits. It's different. You guys
So
are
we
doing much
still
more
have
program
ours. Good.
effectiveness
That's
kind of
what I wanted to
audits.
make
This
sure.
one's more like in terms of our own management of the district, ability to go pursue something. If it's like, okay, something's amiss, can we go audit something?
That's really good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to echo Director Regan, your comments about how exciting this is. And from the discussions that we've had previously about priorities and what I've heard from my colleagues about what folks were looking for about targeted investments, but also still a significant effort to bring down the ratio in schools. And I appreciate parents coming out and talking about still the anomalies in the system and how do we address those, because I think those are real things. My daughter has 35 kids in her 5th grade class. But it's an anomaly, and I recognize that throughout the school. At the same time, it's still her only year in that school. So I just want to say how exciting this is. And again, I hope, one, that two things could happen is now that folks see that there's additional resource, people could begin to really hunker for their pet project.
Yep.
And that's how we could spend our next month and a half about it. Or we can be really thoughtful about saying, how do we best leverage resources? Is this the right balance? And so I'm just really looking forward to hearing those discussions from our community. I'm looking forward to hearing the comments and the feedback that you get through your listening sessions. And I just want to remind folks that the steps that the legislature took got us to change direction, and that they began to stop the disinvestment. But this budget, no matter whether it's $20 million, we just aren't anywhere close to still providing the education our students deserve in this district or statewide. And so I'm hopeful that you all will continue as we move into the 2015 biennium, still work with us to the legislature to increase this investment, because you will consistently hear people say we need more teachers, we need more of this. And it's not always about more, it's about being targeted in investments. That's what I appreciate about your recommendations so far. But it is also about needing more, because they're just, our students are needing that attention. So, thanks.
So the one other thing I'd like to add is there was a request for another listening session for teachers specifically, and we've added one on Thursday night at 5 o'clock here. So, and we'll publicize it. So this Thursday, 5 o'clock in this very location. So.
Look at that.
I know, I'm coming late.
Could you send out
I'm
when
coming to
the
your party
other
late.
ones-
Well, everybody.
Carol, can you send out when the times for us for the other ones?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
I just have, this is my last question. It's not my actual last question, but it's the last question I'm asking. On page 16, slide 31, have ELA, ELD curriculum materials, 1.6 million. Does that include any of the reading materials that we passed on last year that we're trying to get in for kids who are really struggling in reading? In fact, Melissa knows this conversation because we had
I
it
know.
today, so she knows
And it
if
is-
this includes
Yeah.
what we were talking about today.
So what you have before you includes the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade band of reading materials. So that proposal is 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grades.
It doesn't include the ones for the little kids who are really struggling that we talked about today.
Correct.
I think we should look at that and maybe think about sneaking that in there someplace. Thank you.
Nicely done, Steve. See, this is what comes with having a conversation right before the board meeting. Yeah, it's good.
I like that.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys. Yep.
good. Thank you.
So thank you
Well, we do need ESL.
to everybody, all my colleagues. Great questions, and I know that this is just the beginning. We all know this is just the beginning, and next into the listening sessions, and I hope we'll have a big turnout from our community at those sessions. So pay attention and get those dates off the website, and please come and let us know what you're thinking. And I have to say, along with my colleagues here, I am so excited about the fact that this year we are have money to spend instead of having to make those cuts like we have for so many years, and that people are here to talk about what we can add in instead of trying to save programs that they love. So it's great to be able to have those programs and be thinking about what we can add in the coming year. And I would also echo Greg's comments about continuing to talk to the legislature, because that addition was wonderful, but it doesn't even come close to the quality education model that we know that all of our children deserve. So continue to work with us down at the legislature and talking to them about how to fund education to the level where we should be funding it in this state. So with that, we're going to move on to the next piece of our agenda, our presentation about Go Noodle.
And I'll do it. So Kabula Westbrook, I'm going to ask you to come on up, and I think we may have lost our principals who we were, do we still have them here? No. They're still here? Great. So we actually, when we were introduced to healthteacher.com, this was a partnership between Legacy and Dornbecker, and it was a big deal when we were rolling it out, and we now have schools that have been using it that are going to get recognized for their use of it, but we wanted to just bring it back before you, as now it is something we're actively using. And give you an opportunity to experience it. So experiential ed.
I expect everybody to be standing.
No, wait.
It's kind of frightening.
We could do a break after this if you need it.
Look at this.
Huh? Do you need a break?
After this.
You'll get a break. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. My name is Gavitt Westbrook. I'm with Health Teacher, and as the superintendent just mentioned, this is a partnership between Dornbecker Children's Hospital and Randall Children's Hospital. It's a 5-year partnership or a 5-year sponsorship for the Portland Public School District. And I'm going to get off of here and let's see. So there are two products here that are available to Portland Public School teachers. One is healthteacher.com and the other is gonoodle.com. I'm just going to give you a quick overview here of healthteacher.com. This is a K-12 health literacy resource that is available to all the teachers, and I'm in the process of going around and educating and training the teachers on how to use this resource. I can tell you that across the country, we've actually partnered with other districts across the country and have implemented curriculum maps and that sort of thing for other schools. But what you see here, there are over 300 health literacy lessons on this site. We're adding new ones every day. There are ways that teachers can access them. They're basically, each lesson has 4 components to it. They've got usually a PowerPoint component that gives students the gist of the lesson. Then they've got some sort of reading, Q&A type of reading comprehension, then a hands-on activity, and then either an assessment or a rubric. And one great thing about these lessons is they are all Common Core aligned with English Language Arts and Math. So that is just a brief synopsis of Health Teacher. Now let's go to the fun stuff, Go Noodle. As you can see, we have a St. Patty's Day theme going on right now. Go Noodle, we have over 35 what we call brain breaks. Think of them as games that the students can play throughout the course of the day. And I will quick, and one of the things that the students love, you see here, this is their champ. The champ starts out kind of small, and at each level they'll grow arms, heads, legs, get bigger, get stronger, what have you. And I'll click over here to the games. And you can see here we've got over 35 different games. We have partnered with Zumba, so the kids can Zumba in the classroom. We have partnered with the U.S. Olympic track and field team. So here, this is really great because an athlete will come on for a couple minutes, talk to the kids about how they got involved in the sport, loosen the kids up, show them how to do these activities at their desk. Everything here in Go Noodle is focused on desk side movement, 3 to 5 minutes, and then you move on to the next, the teacher can move on to the next thing. So again, over 35, we have several that, 4 here that are Common Core aligned with English Language Arts, math. Freeze It, the kids dance. This covers addition, subtraction, geography, colors, prime numbers. So the Freeze It is a new one that we put in that covers a lot of different subjects. Body Spell, this is great. This is terrific for kinesthetic learners because they see it. They hear it, they see it, then they do it. Think YMCA. So they are spelling out the letters. Word Jam, another one for English Language Arts. And then Mega Math Marathon. This one, the students' math questions come up, then the students answer. The teacher can check yes or no. If they get it right, then they sprint for 15 seconds. And again, all of this is done desk side, right there. So let's, let me, up out of here. Where did my sound go? Hang on. There we go. So if everyone will stand up, please.
This is audience included.
Audience
up out of your seats, audience.
You guys have been sitting for a long time.
Yes.
This is what happens with kids. They sit for a long time, they zone out, you lose them. So what we're going to do here is run in place, jog in place, and then when you see the question come up, shout out an answer for me.
10.
All right, so sprint in place. Here we go, 15 seconds. Come on, you can do it. You can do it.
Well, that's not the sprint.
Another great thing here, look at the meter at the top. This is great. The idea here is that by the end of the year, the kids will run a marathon in the classroom. All right. Did I put you through another one? I'll let you sit down. So, all right. So, we went up a little bit. You can see how gets them up, gets them moving, and it's just the teachers love it, students love it. And we'll move on. All right. So in February, we did the Go Noodle Be a Champ contest across Portland Public Schools, K through 8 schools. The criteria here was that you had to use Go Noodle at least 17 times during the month of February. It was 20, we dropped it down once some of those snow days got thrown in there. So 17 times during the month of February. The winner gets an Olympic track and field athlete to come to his or her classroom and Go Noodle with the kids.
Oh, wow.
So, some data for you again, February through the 3rd through the 28th. So 50 pre-K through 8 schools participated. 313 teachers participated. And I can tell you, to show the success of this, 313 teachers participated, 150 qualified to have the Olympic athlete come to their school.
Wow.
And I can tell you, other districts across the country, that's really, really impressive. We did this in Boise, only 20 teachers qualified. All right, so what that translates to, over 6,200 brain breaks, like you just saw, were played in classrooms across PPS. 16,000 plus minutes of vigorous physical activity for Portland Public School students. And what that translates to is just shy of 300,000 student minutes. Really, really impressive numbers. The winning schools King Elementary, and Forest Park Elementary.
There you go.
So, in fact, I believe, yes, Megan is still here. She was the top user throughout the entire district. So she will have on April 15th. We're still working on the Olympic athlete, but we'll be heading to her classroom. And that is all I have for you. Questions?
Can I ask just a quick question?
Sure.
So it seemed, the times I've seen it used, it's kind of this, where the teacher kind of logs in and then the kids all kind of use it as a full classroom. Folks aren't really entering their own data like that assessment. It's not some collecting student data. Is that right? Or student level data? Like as a kid, I'm not logging in and you're checking my progress? Or
No. Correct. It's all, we can track that, pardon me, from the teacher. So we know that the teacher's using it. When the teacher originally activates their account, they'll put in, I have 30 students in my classroom, so we can track it that way.
And teachers that want to request that you come work with them on how to get going on this, how do they find you?
They can get to me either from my email, cabell.westbrook@healthteacher.com, or if they go to, let's see, yeah, that's the best way. It's just email. And I've been reaching out to principals, and I'm getting principals getting feedback from them, getting them to sign up, and already getting a couple of sessions starting for the fall, so those professional development days. And it's only takes about 30 minutes for me to take the teachers through how to use it, and it's just the response has been just great.
Awesome. Thank you for working with us. Yeah.
Thank you.
And for doing the demo.
Steve?
Yeah.
Steve?
How much time does it take to do, I mean, is there a set period of time for each of the games? You showed games, but you had also all these other things involved that we didn't see?
Right. So each of these is only 3 to 5 minutes. And if, it's like, we just did a minute. We didn't even do a minute, 45 seconds. It's the teacher can decide how long that is used, how long they use it. So it really is up to the teacher. If the kids get back on track and, they know, okay, if we do this, if we just do this for 2 minutes, then we're going to be back to learning. Or a lot of teachers will use it, guys, let me just get you through this, and then we're going to do a brain break. Use it as a carrot. Kids love it.
Do you know do we have an art curriculum, I mean a health curriculum at, say, 4th grade? I mean, are we actually doing, and I like this stuff, it's fun, and I've taught elementary school a long time, and that would have been a nice thing to have, get those kids up and move a little, get back to work, I mean, when we went away from recess, it was a big mistake. Do we have a health curriculum? Because I've been wondering this question, and this is this, frankly, no offense to the Common Core people, I don't care if it's aligned to the Common Core at all. I would hope it wouldn't be, but it sounds like it is. But is it aligned somewhat to our health curriculum?
Yes.
Do we have a health curriculum?
And we have a scope and sequence, K1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's aligned to Common Core standards. Yes.
So it's kind of a new one?
The nice part about this health curriculum is because health is such an evolving field, it also, every day they add lessons.
Well, do you have, I mean, do we have a certain amount of time that a 5th grade teacher will say, or 4th grade teacher is supposed to do health a week?
Yes.
And how much time is that?
I'd have to review, we just received it today, but I want to say, Melissa, where are you? 30, 60 minutes a week.
And
that's from the top of my head. But we have the sheet, and we ensure that those minutes are spent.
And we ensure
we see them in the teacher's plans. Yes, they're delivered.
We got to write those up?
Yes.
Okay. Otherwise they wouldn't do it probably, huh? I don't know what. Okay, thank you. I'll look some more. I'll look some more into it maybe.
Thank you for
coming. Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it. Tanya, thank you for coming up.
Lots of fun, and thanks for
congratulations to our winning schools and winning teachers.
Absolutely.
Yay.
Yay. Don't move too much. Okay, we're going to going to take a 3-minute break. 3
Thank you.
minutes. Okay, back from our break. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, which has to do with the calendars. We have 3 separate items. Superintendent Smith, would you like to introduce this?
I would. So I'm going to ask Amanda Whalen, who's the advisor to the superintendent, and Rudy Rudolph, who has been the chair of our calendar committee, to come up and present this. And the first item will be a discussion about snow days for the current calendar year.
Just listen.
Good evening. So what you have in front of you is a draft resolution that would add 2 additional instructional days at the end of the school year, specifically June 2nd and June 13th, to make up for the 2.5 days we missed in February due to snow days. It also mentions that we had 3 facilities issues at 3 different schools. So at Wilson, we had 1 day where we had it for a broken water main. At Stevenson, 1.5 days for lack of heat, and at Ainsworth, 1 day for a broken sewer pipe. As you know, we just received confirmation from the Oregon Department of Education that we have met all of our instructional hour requirements. This allows us to stay on track in order to be able to do that.
And actually, all 3 of these are coming tonight for discussion, but they come back on the 31st for vote. So like tonight is really discussion and getting information. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions or comments around adding days for snow?
Yes, I have one. We had set aside snow days in the calendar, and so is there any cost associated with this, or?
No, there'd be, minimal costs. There are no.
Okay, that's what I recalled.
Yeah.
And yes, they're already pre-designated in the calendar that in the event of snow days, they're already.
Formally
yeah.
authorized.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just make a mention?
Dr.
I
Blau?
would be remiss if I didn't mention that my daughter had great protest over this. She thought it was ridiculous that we were adding 2 additional days at the end. She thought our snow days were just fine. Thank you very much, but thanks for bringing this.
Okay, shall we move on to the calendars?
So second presentation is the calendars for 2014-15 and 2015-16, and again, report
Same
from the
team.
calendar committee.
Hi. So what you have in front of you is are the 2 draft calendars again for 2014-15 and 2015-16, and a draft resolution to go with those. So some of the exciting work that happened in the calendar committee this year was that we were able to put forth 2 calendars where we moved parent-teacher conferences to October, which is something that has been discussed for a long time, of parents and teachers wanting those conferences earlier in the year. This moves them off of the week of Thanksgiving and puts 2 instructional days in that week, the Monday and Tuesday, and puts the conferences back in October. The other thing is that we, as Superintendent Smith mentioned earlier, we are adding 2 additional instructional days this year for the 14-15 school year, where Labor Day falls on September 1st. We would be adding that day. We would be starting on, we're proposing starting on September 2nd for 2014-15, and for the 15-16 school year, we are proposing starting adding those 2 days before Labor Day, which would have us starting August 28th. 27th. I need Rudy to do the technical.
Can I just clarify real quickly?
Yeah.
We were given some information in our packets on this.
Yes.
And then there were 2 new calendars that were at our seats tonight. But one of the calendars says 2013-14.
So you should have, okay, so what you should have is, in your packets, you should have had a calendar for 14-15 and for 15-16.
Yes.
I provided you the 13-14 calendar at your seat in case there was a question about snow days. I was going to
Thank
direct
you.
you to that.
Double these.
Plus it shows that, reminder that we started this current school year on September
4th.
Okay.
So, questions? Okay. So, for the school year for next year, certainly when we added 2 days to the calendar, our hope and expectation was that we would add those prior to Labor Day. Because we want to have the biggest impact on student achievement, so the earlier the kids are in school, the more instructional hours they'll get before, especially at the high school level, taking, IB tests, AP tests, any of the statewide. So my understanding is that the calendar committee that met had put those prior to Labor Day.
Yes.
And so can you help me understand how we landed after Labor Day again?
Sure.
Because that was definitely not what I had expected was going to be the calendar.
Right. So, but what we were trying to do was impact student achievement by having as many school days in the beginning of the year versus adding the days at the end of the year. As we said in the memo, this is next year, 2014, is the year where we have the earliest possible Labor Day. It's September 1st. So by starting school on September 2nd, you actually add one instructional day before May and one instructional day after. So while this is not quite what the calendar committee had recommended, we also received feedback from a number of other constituent groups saying that this is a late time, and you are not voting until March 31st. So this is a late time to do this change for families. So and parks programming and other camps are already set up to run all the way up until Labor Day. This would be sort of a late moment to do that for families. We are also already proposing the change in terms of parent-teacher conferences. So that was 2 different sets of changes that families would have coming already on March 31st. And finally, we have a number of our summer bond programs, which are going to have both the potential of the 2 additional days at the end of the school year for snow days, as well as the potentially 2 additional days before Labor Day, which would compress the amount of time that they have to do a lot of projects this summer. So I think they were at 65 days prior to the adding of the 2 additional snow days. They're now down to 63. I believe, for that. So this is a way where we would be adding 1 additional instructional day before the May 1st compared to this year, and then we'd be adding 2 additional instructional days before May 1st for the 15-16 school year.
So when I think about the calendar committee, which I have served on for 10 years, it's a pretty strong representative group, and I presume that they looked at all of the above, and they still had us starting, I believe, on August 28th. So I would encourage my colleagues to be thinking about whether or not we could still do that, because that would allow our kids the very most instructional time when it matters. I am really disappointed that we are considering adding these days after Labor Day. That was never the intention, I don't believe, as we were going through our teacher contract negotiations. It was always to add the days up front, and I think we have enough warning now to be talking to our contractors and others. If we want to impact student achievement, we need to be adding these days earlier, in my opinion.
Other comments? Steve?
Ruth's ready to go.
Oh, sure, yeah, no, I guess, I'm comfortable with this as a compromise solution, given all the different factors that you mentioned, and that we will, if it would be different if Labor Day weren't on the very first day of September. So I totally respect everything that Bobby's saying. This, to me, given all the different factors, is a compromise that I could live with, and then going into next year with that whole year to prepare, then we will actually go into August. But we'll be starting on September 2nd, which is the earliest I can recall. So to me, I'm comfortable with it.
Director Buell?
What was the teacher representative, and I got an email that said the teacher representative, Terry Harrington, had some questions yet. Since she represents more people than everybody else put together, I was wondering what her questions were.
She was on the calendar committee.
Right, and she said, I got an email that said everybody was pretty much unanimous except the teacher representative who had some concerns.
The concern that she expressed during the meeting for 14-15 was the fact that for elementary children, and she's an elementary teacher also, that the elementary children would be starting for 2 days in August if we did the before Labor Day. And then they would have a 3-day weekend, and then they would have a first full week. Really wouldn't be a full week, it would be 4 days. And when you're trying to establish with elementary children a routine and set your discipline, to have the first 2 weeks that kids are in attendance be so chopped up, that she was hoping that we would consider starting in 14-15 after Labor Day.
Thank you. Mike, I have a comment then too. Well, I actually have another question. If we go back to the end of October here, 29th, 30th, and 31st, which is AM, PM, evening, AM, PM, evening, and then AM.
Yes. Did you want me to explain what that meant?
No.
Okay.
I think I know that part. What I'm wondering is why we mess around with the AM one. We're letting the teachers off to go home early because they did the evening conferences. Is that where that's going?
For every time that you have an evening conference, there needs to be some type of compensatory.
Right.
And if you have 2 evening conferences, and those are the choices of the individual schools, how they want to do that. If they decide to have 2 evening conferences, then that's 2 half days. If a school chose to have the Wednesday, Thursday evening conferences, then Friday they would not have conferences, and there wouldn't be any students and there wouldn't be any teachers required to come. That's identical to what we do now, but instead of in October, we do that in November. In the past, we have had Monday, Tuesday, 2 days of conferences, and in the case where schools did 2 evening conferences, then Wednesday before Thanksgiving was no school for students again because there had been conferences, and then that comp day where teachers didn't have to show. They were excused for the day. If, however, a school decided to do 1 evening conference, then they would have day conferences and evening conference, let's say on Monday. On Tuesday, they would have a day conference, nothing on Tuesday evening. Then there would be a half day for conferences on Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and then the teachers would be dismissed and allowed to leave in the afternoon. We're doing that identical setup, but in October because we believe it's very beneficial for families to have an earlier communication in a formal way with teachers. So we were striving to do that in October, and that was a unanimous decision.
What's the total number for an elementary school teacher that has 30 kids? What do we figure for conference hours? We figure of 15 hours?
Well, I'm proud to say that in our district, the percentage of parents who come to parent-teacher conferences is huge.
Yeah,
we get
and
a
it is
great,
in most places.
yeah, it's tremendous. And in some cases, we have families that are divorced, divided, and so a lot of our teachers have been willing to have conferences for if they can't come together. You know what I'm saying? So it's difficult for me to say how many actual hours it calculates out to, but if you have 30 students and you have, say, a half an hour for a conference, and you might have to do twice for a family, it really does add up.
Are kids attend any of these days, any of these 3 days?
They don't attend for instruction.
No, I mean for instruction, that's my...
No, there's no actual instruction,
no, so it's 3 full days.
But the state of Oregon counts parent-teacher conferences as days of instruction.
Okay.
So that's calculated into our days.
All right, thank you very much. I think this is my last question here.
You have
So,
you done?
No, I have another one.
So my understanding in the past is
Go ahead,
we've had 2 days of parent-teacher, and the compensatory time has typically been the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So why aren't we doing parent-teacher conferences on Thursday and Friday, and then having the compensatory day on the 26th? Or why are we doing 4 days? Why are we giving off on the 26th of November?
And why isn't that being used as a compensatory day? I know people like having that day off, so why wouldn't that be used as the compensatory days and you move the student-teacher, the parent-teacher conferences to Thursday and Friday?
It's in the next month. It has to be in
It doesn't matter. You can do it whenever you want to.
During the calendar committee discussion, there were different options, and having them Monday, Tuesday, having them Tuesday, Wednesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Thursday, Friday, that type of thing went on. And overwhelmingly, it didn't matter whether we were talking to elementary principals, whether we were talking to PAT representative, other related unions, parents who were there representing their groups. The feeling was that the 26th, most families were used to and liked having that time off.
And I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just asking why we're not using that as the compensatory day. So we have that day off, and then we just have 2 days for parent-teacher conferences instead of 3.
Because not all, by doing that, you would require that all schools would do a Thursday, Friday day and evening. And right now, it is up to the school, and if a teacher chooses that she does not or he does not want to do 2 evenings, that teacher would then be able to do that conferences on the half day that would be the comp day. And then you would be having that teacher do conferences in October for all of their families except the ones that they would be doing on the comp day, which now would be towards the end of November. So to keep that consistent, you would be doing Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And because overwhelmingly the committee wanted to be able to have the 26th off, the day before Thanksgiving, they felt that was important for families to still do. The choice was to make that a down day for schools, but the district would still be open. And that was again, a request of the majority of the committee.
Right, so what we used to do is we used to have the 2 days plus that 3rd day, and what we're adding now is a 4th day. That's what I'm concerned about. It used to be that the 26th was that extra
Yes.
day, so we would have Monday, Tuesday, then Wednesday.
There is
as the
another down
compensatory
day.
day in the part.
There is another down day.
So
that
now
is
we're
correct.
adding another down day.
But that day is we're still having 178 days.
Right,
because
but
of
the
this.
problem is, this is right in the beginning of the year where we're trying to
And it's only.
get more instructional time at the beginning of the year. That's what I'm concerned
And
about.
as Rudy points out, it's only a down day if the teachers decide to do the 2 evening conferences. So that is, it's because otherwise they are coming in for a half day.
But the students aren't coming in for a half day, are they?
Yes, they would.
No, students would not be having instruction.
It would be a half day.
Students come to those conferences most often, but they
Right.
won't be having instruction because
Right,
it's
so
parent-teacher
we
conferences.
now have 4 days locked up rather than 3 in the past. So I've got a problem with that. It seems that we should be able to figure that out. Hmm?
Halloween.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
So
Having-
you're going to miss
not the most-
Halloween.
not the most
Wouldn't
effective.
surprise me if the teachers didn't think, hey, that's a good deal.
It's not the most effective
Halloween is a
instruction.
pretty hard, not as hard as the day after Halloween, which doesn't exist on this, so.
Well, this is Saturday. Yeah, that would be Saturday.
Okay.
But there is-
Anything else?
yeah.
Bobby, anything else?
Yeah, those are huge. We're losing several days of instruction at the beginning of the year, which was exactly what we didn't want to do. Right now, when we're starting the school year on September 2nd, we're basically starting it exactly when we would have even if we hadn't added the new days. And we're now losing an additional day during parent-teacher conferences. So as far as I can tell, we're losing days in the beginning that we could easily
We
get
actually
back.
would- we
and
actually
have-
would have, I'm sorry, we actually would have started on September 3rd because we had reinstituted a planning day after Labor Day last year.
Well, we've gone back and forth in the last couple of years. We've had some years where we start the day after Labor Day. Most districts start the day after Labor Day. So, again, if we want to have instruction early in the year, we need to be thinking about these things. And I'm actually looking for other colleagues to weigh in here, because part of what this, if you guys are going to vote on the 31st, understand where you guys are and what you're wanting us to go back and either rework or that you're feeling like it's on the right track. This is your moment.
I have a question. Which would be, have we thought, or what are the pros and cons of separating the high school from the K-8? So
Separating it in terms
I'm
of...
saying you're
Different
saying that's a
calendar.
bad idea. So, but I wanted to ask a question.
Yep.
In other words, bring the high schools in August 28th. I'm trying to respond to the concern about the elementary kids. It's not a concern with high school kids.
Good question.
Well, if you start on Thursday and Friday, I mean, the kids can get all their schedules in place, they can get adjusted. I mean, I don't buy the argument personally that it's that disruptive for kids. I mean,
Yeah.
no matter what, the first day or two is kind of a getting acquainted kind of time. So I don't buy the argument to start with. I think the earlier we start, the better.
Yeah.
And, that way on September 2nd, if you start on if you start on August 28th for 2 days, then September 2nd, they come in, you're charged, you're running. So I don't buy the argument to start with.
And
But
Bobby, you were not on the calendar committee this year?
we
She
had
was
one
unable
day
to.
that we were told the calendar committee would meet, and I wasn't available that day, and so we had tried to see if another board member could make it, and they couldn't. I've been on it for 10 years, I've heard all of these arguments. But to me, we're losing 2 days early in the calendar that we should not give up if we care about instructional time.
So, I would agree with Bobby on this, if you're looking for where my head's at. The earlier, the better.
So I guess I'm not totally understanding, it's been a few years since my kids were in elementary conferences. So why can't we just do a Thursday and a Friday for conferences and have why do we need 3 days? Well,
Okay.
there's Thursday evening.
Contractually, I'm a little short here. Contractually,
Right.
we can ask teachers to be at parent-teacher conferences for an evening. And if
Okay.
we do ask them to do that, we have to make up that time for and give them a
Right.
half day somewhere else where
Right.
they're off. If we did it on Thursday and Friday for 2 days, October 30th and 31st, if we did 2 days of conferences during the day where students are not in session but parents are coming in, and if a teacher didn't want to do 2 evenings, and you're talking about a Friday evening, and I'll also tell you that in our discussion with
Right.
the
I know that.
committee, expecting parents to come on a Friday evening
Right.
you're not going to get a lot of
So you don't
parents.
do the evening, okay.
You do one evening.
You do one
So if
evening and you do 2 days.
If you do 2 days, there aren't enough hours to get all the parents in for conferences. You need that extra half of a day,
So
whether
you
it
need
be
two
an
and a half
evening.
days for conferences, is what you're saying.
Right,
Is what
a
you
day,
need. 2.5 days.
A day and an evening, a day and an evening, or a day, an evening, a day, and another half day.
Mhm.
That's the amount of time you need to truly get all of your students' families in.
Okay.
So if we did the Thursday, Friday, and we did the 2 evenings, then
I
we're
think you
okay.
answered my
But if
question.
we-
I think
we're
you
okay,
answered
but
it.
if we didn't do the 2 evenings, when does that teacher who doesn't do the other evening do that?
Right.
Was that clear?
I get it's 2.5 days that you need, and that's all I
And you
need.
can't do Wednesday night.
So
You couldn't do
I'm
Wednesday
okay with
night.
it as proposed. I do think, if I think of my own situation, I think, coming for a day or two before Labor Day, I'm not going anywhere, it's fine. But I do think about some of our students who might be the first time in school, and they really need that time to kind of get there and figure out what are the routines. The teachers are really trying to figure out what are their needs. So I guess I hear that you don't agree with the argument about starting and stopping isn't that big of a deal. But and especially for this first year, as our whole community transitions to that, I guess I'm comfortable with it as proposed.
So you realize that the following year we would start on Thursday?
I do.
Exactly what you're saying.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense next year. That makes no sense.
I guess the other
Well,
thing
on the
that I
following,
find-
I'm sorry.
I guess the other thing that I find ironic is that we have so many people who are saying it's so important for us to increase our instructional hours, but you don't want to go to school the 26th before Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving. What,
ridiculous.
What is that? I don't understand that.
Right.
Either going to school and instructional hours are
Important
really
or not.
important, or you want to go on vacation for Thanksgiving. I'm not understanding why we're having a day off the day before Thanksgiving, I guess.
I can tell
I
you
know.
that the committee
Committee.
felt very strongly that that's a family time where people are preparing to do, whether they're traveling far or they're just going
Right.
across the town and they're preparing the things that they take to, the expression
The
was to
committee
grandma's
also
house.
thought
you know.
Kids are working
School
hard
on
on that.
August 28th.
But I also, I also wanted to point out, when you made the comment about 2015-16, we would start again on a Thursday. If you take a look at the 2015-16 calendar, you'd start on a Thursday, 27, you'd have Friday the 28th, but then you have an entire week of school. The 31st, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, you have an entire week of school before you hit that Labor Day weekend. That was the benefit of doing that, the ability to do that without having it quite so chopped up, because it's the latest, we're going from the earliest Labor Day we could have to the latest Labor Day we could have.
Plus, our contractors, we would know well, way in advance, so they could plan, we could plan our summer
Correct.
work accordingly. And that's one of the biggest pieces for me, really, is making sure that the summer bond work does not get truncated or rushed or thrown off kilter just by a sudden change for this summer. So there's a lot of moving parts here, obviously, but.
So my guess is that we are putting contractor priorities in front of student achievement, and I don't get that.
No, I think we're putting the
figure it out.
bond in front
No,
of
we're
that.
not. No, we're not. They could figure it out. I
On
mean,
time and on
look,
budget.
you guys, it's March now. So they have to adjust their calendar by 2 days.
Steve, where are you at on this one?
Oh, I'm kind of against pulling it up.
You're against what?
I'm kind of against pulling
You're against
on it.
polling?
Yeah, come in with, I'm going to say something else that, I kind of, Bobby makes some good points, but at the same time, it is Halloween. I mean, and Halloween's a huge thing to, it's, and I do think that, I did like that 26th, the day before Thanksgiving. I do like that for people to move, but I am a big time, what Bobby's saying makes very good sense to me. But, so that doesn't help you at all, so really I'm kind of not up by. I do have a comment of where I would like to have a huge change here.
That's what I want to hear. I mean,
Okay.
truly, I'm going to say right now is your opportunity. If you guys are looking to have anything
Oh,
come
no,
back to
I
you
do.
differently than what
Yes.
you've got right now you kind of have people weighing each
Yeah.
other out.
Well, as you bring in
Yeah.
two of them and we can vote.
That's what I'm looking for you.
That's how I think you should do it. Instead of bringing in one based on what we think, bring in, okay, then should I tell my other one?
Yeah.
All right.
Please do.
We spent $1.9 million to get 2 more days in the calendar because we care about the days. Well, I'm going to get you 3 days for free. Doesn't cost you a dime and actually helps kids to a huge degree because they're in school. And that's, we eliminate all those late openings, every one, we dump them all. And the reason you do that is we have 72 hours of professional development that we can use throughout the year, which comes to about 10 days worth of, we have 10 days worth of professional development built in here because of our 2-hour, nobody else, when I was teaching up at Covington Middle School up in Vancouver, we had 1 day of faculty meetings a month for an hour. You don't need all, I mean, there's a lot of time in those faculty meetings. We're filling time, a lot of it. And it's not like there aren't people who use it. I'm sure you go out and some people really use it. But a lot of what we're doing doesn't make sense. So here's 3 more days. You guys who are talking about days, here's 3. Just dump every one of the late openings, and we don't have late openings anymore, and do your professional development after school on Mondays for 2 hours. And it's huge. We also have some professional development days built in here at the start, which you have to be careful, really. I don't even like professional days built in at the start on those 3 days. Teachers come back to school, they don't really want to sit in a meeting. What they want to do is set up the room. What they want to do is organize for the year. If we expect teachers to be organized, to give them, to take their time at the beginning of the year, you guys talking about early time? We want our teachers ready to go, because you can actually sit down at the start of the year, and if they give you a day and a half, you're not ready to go. You're coming in other times, but you're really not ready to go. We should be going 3 days, maybe have a little bit of get together at the start, and then dump all these late openings. We have plenty of time. Gives you 3 days. It's huge. So we moved from what, do you have 179 now? Now you got 182. You're welcome. Thank you.
Tom, did you?
I think
Are
I
you done?
spoke.
Okay. Andrew?
You know, I'm not really sure. I think we can all agree that this isn't really ideal, but I'm not sure what I would change. You know, I don't really have an in-depth knowledge of calendars. I don't really have a problem with starting on the 27th, actually. I don't think that's a huge issue for me, but I agree with the concern about losing a day, you know, 1 more day, which would be, you know, the 26th or the 25th. Yeah, I do have a problem with that, but again, I'm not sure how that would be remedied, so.
So I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think I will. On late opening days, what did you use those for? Think back to when you were a freshman, sophomore.
Well, late opening days, you know, that actually is pretty hard to remember.
Slept in, probably. That's why you don't remember you were
well, I'm trying to think. Yeah. Well, I don't think we had, it wasn't a tutorial period, right, back then? It wasn't like we could come in and do work.
It was when my sons were there and they used it, but I was curious if they're still using it for part of that.
Well, we don't have the 2-hour late opening in high school anymore. So we have we get dismissed early on, at least at Grant, it's Tuesday and Wednesday. So I know some students use that. When we met with SuperSAC, we actually talked about that use of time. And a lot of students told us it's really valuable to them. But again, that's not the 2-hour late opening for us. That's something different.
It's different.
So.
It's the same kind of thing.
It's the same kind of thing, but again, some kids use it and some don't. So.
Just curious. Thank you.
Yeah.
Others? Questions? Superintendent Smith, you have, Greg?
I was just going to point out that I like moving the conferences earlier in the year. I long for the day when we actually have at least 2 conferences throughout the year. That if we could do a spring check-in, I hope that we can work toward that at some point. And I also, what I appreciate, not just about an earlier connection with parents in the year, but I also appreciate that it was actually removed from that November timeframe, because I have heard of teachers taking the time to set up conferences and then parents being gone, but not because of some family tragedy or crises, but just because they were going on vacation. And that feels disrespectful to our staff and our professionals. So I just appreciate that relocation takes care of some of that issue.
Agreed. Thank you. Superintendent Smith, you have everything you need?
Not just they have a wackadoo set of input here. It is, it's totally wild. In terms of it's okay, we'll be coming back to you with something and we'll see what you do with it.
Well, one of the things that would be really helpful, just following up on what Director Buell said, is we've been doing these late openings now for a couple of years. And my understanding is that the teachers actually really wanted that at the time, because it allows more professional development within their school. But I guess I would like an assessment on whether or not that is an effective use of time, or whether we should keep the full days, or whether we should get rid of them altogether. So I actually would like to get more information on that and what we've learned over the last couple of years and if it is more effective.
Okay. And I'll tell you, yes, what we were doing at the point that we converted to doing the late openings was going from things where they were more considered drive-by kind of
Yeah,
PD,
all
where you
district.
leave and go someplace else
Right.
to go do your PD, to saying we want site-based with our colleagues, you know.
And I remember
more-
the union actually wanting
It was a
that
high
at the time.
advocacy for that
but
as the shift.
I'm not sure.
Well, and I will say in the conversations we've had about trade-offs in the high school schedules, a huge thing has been not wanting to let go of PD time. So I will say that's been a high value there, but yes, we can get you some more information on the late start.
And thanks to the calendar committee for putting it together and weighing
Okay,
all these
and you're
things.
not
Sorry,
done.
one of us was
Yeah,
not.
we have one more
You're not
calendar to
done
look
yet. We
at.
have part two, which is a different, different
more.
presenting
Different
panel.
team, different team.
I know, and I'm gonna say, hopefully you glean some gems of where to go next. Okay, so our, the next
About
piece
Rosa
Or do we
Parks?
have a question?
is Rosa Parks. So
Oh,
I'll-
in 15, 16.
Are we done with 15, 16 too?
they're the same concepts, just
I know,
apply to
I
our
just
2
wanted to make
years.
sure that
Yeah,
people-
you got the same deal going 2 years. Okay, and at this point, Sasha Perrins, who's the regional administrator for the Roosevelt Cluster, and Tamala Newsom and Rudy are going to present a balanced calendar that has been something this school has been talking about as one of their SIG strategies. And they're putting it in front of you. It was also something I had included in the budget, so this was a budget consideration of what it takes for us to do an alternate calendar. So they will present to you both the theory of action here and what the calendar would actually look like. Sasha, you gonna do the intro?
I was, and thank you. I was going to
Did I
introduce
just
Tamala
tell you?
Newsom
Go for it.
and Rudy Rudolph, and we were going to talk to you about the year-round balanced calendar proposal at Rosa Parks School. And Tamala will talk a few minutes, and then if you have any questions, we'll happily respond.
Good evening, directors. I'm glad to be here this evening, especially to talk about something that has become a real passion about the way we educate our students. As all of you know, we are a priority school, and we have been working very hard to change that designation. We feel like we're a priority, but it has a little different meaning with the state. So we have really been talking about, as a staff and as a team, how do we initiate, how do we get higher leverage learning opportunities for our students? And one of the things that kept coming up, and this has been for several years actually, is that summer learning loss has been a huge concern. That where many of our students are out during the summer, they are not actively engaged in any type of education, or educational opportunities, and that's a huge concern. We know from the data when they come back, our kids have lost. It takes them longer to get caught up. Some of the kids are taking as long as 6 to 8 weeks to actually get back to where they were when school was out. We've been using an assessment called MAP, so the data, we have it right in front of us. Those, we use it from K to 5, so it even includes our babies. And then also we have teachers who loop with students who know where their kids walked out of the door. And they come back and those kids, again, getting them caught up. So that has been really a huge concern. And we began to explore the idea of a year-round balanced calendar and what that would mean for our kids by not sitting out of school all summer and then having shorter breaks, intermittent, but not just the break, but actually being able to provide some intervention during that time. We want to provide targeted academic support during the intersession, and what this would do is actually allow our school year for some of our students with the high academic need, we would be able to provide anywhere from 4 to 14 days, depending on if they qualify to come back for those interventions. In the past, we have done a whole year, and then we realize, okay, these kiddos aren't where they need to be. And we've tried to put together, if we have Title I dollars or some additional dollars, a summer school program. And then we chase kids, because who wants to be in school when all the kids outside playing in the summer, and try to get them to come in and then provide that. It just makes a lot more sense to be able to do this at intervals during the school year. So we are very excited about that opportunity to really be able to bring kids back. So every 3-week intercession, 1 week would be for academic support. And then we're also looking at, for kids who are doing well, because sometimes they get forgotten about, is providing, I call it beyond the classroom. So more enrichment, taking the lessons, the things they already know, but saying, okay, who can we partner with in our community that would again provide for them some extension of their learning. So we're really excited about the opportunity possible to go forward with this. And so hopefully this is something that you will see what we've seen in it and our staff has seen in it, that we feel like it's going to be good for kids.
And we'll happily take any questions if you have some.
Director Buell?
Thank you very much, Ms. Newsom, for being here. Shows real dedication to come out this evening. You certainly have my condolences.
Thank you.
And having said that, I really am not a big year-round school fan. My first wife taught in year-round school Peninsula, so I'm pretty familiar with it. A man who I've been friends with for 47 years, very close friend, taught in year-round school in Woodburn, and we've talked about it tons of times. And I don't like it because I think it it sends those kids home in the middle of the winter to sit on their computer and play computer games, and it's very disruptive for families. I don't know how you have that worked through, but it would take incredible work to do that. That's why I'm not a big fan of it. I don't buy the agrarian argument that people always make for year-round school. 99% of the places in the country could have switched to year-round school if they wanted to, and they didn't do it. So, I'm also a little hesitant about, I know there's a huge summer learning loss. I don't buy the statistics that it's just in the summer. I think that it's also in the winter, in the spring, in the fall. I can remember teaching fractions in the fall, and then a couple months later you teach them and it seems like they forgot everything. Maybe I was just a bad teacher, I don't know. But so all that stuff goes together, and I have to ask about the disruptions to the families that are out there in those 3-week periods. I don't know how that's worked, but I think it takes more discussion than here. I guess we won't vote on this till next week. Mm-hmm. Maybe I could come out and chat with you. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
And see your school. I'd love to do that. Okay. You're going to be there sometime this week, back
I
at
won't
work.
be there this week, but yeah, that makes it a little difficult with next week being spring break.
Well, yeah.
But
you'll be there this coming week.
No.
No.
So it'd be the
This
week
week.
after. So we'll
This
vote
week.
before you're there.
Yeah.
We're voting on the
I
31st.
don't think you're voting until the 31st.
Oh, the 31st, after spring break.
After spring break.
But I'll be there on the 31st.
I can sneak out maybe on the 31st.
I will be there.
But maybe you could respond a little bit to
Yeah.
Steve's concerns. I know I'd like to hear it.
Yeah. So I'm not making the argument, and our community is not making the argument about the agrarian calendar, because I agree that may not be. I do know that we have breaks already within our school year and on the traditional calendar.
Right.
And so what we're talking about is simply, in some cases, adding a week here. But remember, we're also talking about bringing kids in and back to school, so they're not sitting at home that 3rd week. It is also important to remember that those interventions that they would get along the way means that they're not just continually pile up misinformation. We are very fortunate at Rosa Parks to be partnered with the Boys and Girls Club and also Portland Park and Rec, in other words, the Charles Jordan Recreation Center, and then of course Home Forward. Now Home Forward doesn't provide those kinds of services, but we are a partnership out in North Portland in the New Columbia area, and one of the things that we've talked about as a partnership is then how could we provide things for kids when they're out of school and other children may be in school during that time. And then of course in the summer they'll be in school and other children will be out of school, for part of the summer. And they have stepped up and said we support what you're doing, we agree, and that will look different based on the partnership. So Boys and Girls Club, who's attached right in the building, and if you haven't seen it, I think it's just an awesome program. They know that they will be doing some shifting in their program, but also opening to have activities for students so that they're not sitting at home doing just what you described.
And there's, just so everybody's clear on this, I talked to your vice principal today.
The assistant principal?
Nice woman.
Yes.
And she was very helpful, and she said, you're basically only considering 1 week of intervention in that 3-week period.
In the 3-week period.
So
the
that,
students are still getting
right. So
their,
they're still
their
right.
time
and
off.
they,
We're just,
yes,
and when, I think when Rudy speaks to the calendar, I believe it's easier to see when you understand how that's being broke up, and I know you all have had an opportunity to look at a couple and you'll be deciding on which one, but I think it's important to know that those weeks, yes, we're only providing the intervention during week 3 of each intersession. However, those partners will still be providing programming for kids during the other 2 weeks.
So it's a total of 4 weeks of added on.
It will actually be a total of anywhere from 4 to 14 days. So some students, it's 3.
You mean total of the whole year?
Total of the whole year.
So up
3
to
weeks.
3
because
weeks
in the
total.
summer, the summer now is much shorter, and we have to stop and clean and get ready for the new school year.
How long was your summer school when you had summer school?
Usually it ran anywhere about 19 days. We always took off the 4th of July. So usually we started and then we would lose that day. The other thing is that when we didn't have funds, we haven't had summer school in a while because we haven't had the funding to do so. The funding is built in. We're really looking at a way to make this work systemically.
So you've got funding. I saw the funding source. It only is $60,000 from us, I think, is all.
And then we have, we will be using our money differently because we need to get kids before they get a lot of learning on top of learning they didn't understand in the first place. It is so essential, and we feel like it'll give us a little leverage. I might say that when we talk about underserved communities and children that I'm working off and on all summer long. I come in and by July, Ms. Newsom, I'm ready to come back to school. I'm like, oh, really? So our kids really want that structure. They do. They enjoy being out. They enjoy playing. They enjoy going to programs.
The structure is important there.
But then they're done with that. And that's time we can have them back in the classroom. And our staff feels very strongly about making sure that we're doing everything possible for our kids. And as we started, doing surveying parents and talking to them about this, people are like, when does it start? Is it starting? Where do I sign on the line? And so we realize it may not work for every family. We understand that.
Right.
And
That's the whole thing about it.
Sure.
Yeah,
and
some it works for, some love it,
some it doesn't. But I think that when parents understand why you're doing it, it is a change. It's a shift. It's a cultural shift in how we teach our children. And I honestly believe that with that said, giving it a try, I think parents are going to be pleased. If our parents that absolutely know that this doesn't work for them, then respectfully we need to help and accommodate their request for either a different work site or a different school for their children.
This is going to seem like a silly question, but I don't think I personally don't think it is a silly question.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be willing to vote for this. Rose Parks is the lowest economic school in the district, 95% free and reduced lunch. Would you trade not going on the year-round school? Because I don't think the achievement shows much on it. I mean, it doesn't make the achievement isn't much different year-round or not. I mean,
well, what the research says is actually it is when you provide intervention.
Intervention.
Right.
If you provide the intervention, that helps. So it's regular,
Yes.
straight-up stuff that people want to talk about. I had a box one time full of research, literally on year-round school, and so I really have a pretty good background on it. Suppose we traded like this. Would you take this trade? We give you another half-time certificated librarian so you can keep your library open. we hand you another counselor, so instead of having one per 400, how many kids you got in your school? 400
A
and?
little under 400 now,
Yeah,
yes.
so you have one counselor now.
Yes.
And we give you another counselor, and we give you another extra person you can put where you like as a community advocate, social service coordinator. Would you take that and stay on the schedule, or would you go to year-round school?
Year-round.
Would you?
I
Okay,
would.
good.
I would.
tells
I'll
me
take the other things you're offering as
Well,
well,
sure.
but if I can't have that, then I would choose that.
Okay, now, but you're serious about that? If it was a
I'm
serious
very
thing, if we
serious.
really said that, you would take the year-round
I
school
would.
instead of this? Okay,
I
thank you.
would,
That helps
because
me
of
a
the
lot.
time with children and the interventions that we can provide to our kids before, again, they just keep going deeper in the hole. We got to turn this thing around.
We have to get you a full-time certificate, so your library's open all day. We need to do that.
That'd be awesome.
Hopefully, we'll do that for those schools that absolutely need, because kids read. In order to read, you have to get kids reading. And if you have a certificated librarian, it makes and your library's open all day, it makes a huge, huge difference. It's the one thing we've overlooked in our reading program. Well, not the one, but we really overlooked it. So I'm going to suggest that for some of those schools when we get into the budget itself. So there you go. You have a
Dr.
nice day.
Atkins?
Thank you.
I just wanted to chime in and just say I am so thrilled that we're doing this and just very excited and can't wait to see it roll out. And I'm hoping that this is a sign, assuming this goes well, which I'm sure it will, that we're going to have a shift and start doing this more and more across our district. I think. So my question was more around, we used to have a year-round calendar at Peninsula. I don't think it had the intercession feature, and at the time we talked about, well, we should move to something that's more uniform, and I remember thinking, oh, why aren't we, anyway, so I'm just excited that it seems like we're now getting more of a strategic shift, so I wanted to hear a little bit more.
And we had a different year-round one at Abernathy at the same time.
Right.
So,
There was one in Edwards.
So
Yeah.
like part of what we were saying, and yes, we're looking at what Rosa Parks is doing as a pilot, and there have been other schools expressing interest, particularly the SIG and focus and priority schools and the ones with SIG grants. This has been one of the things people have looked at. And the one thing we've said is if we do one, let's do a standard year-round options, because not do one-offs and have them all be
Oh, good
variation on
Lord,
a
no.
theme,
Yeah.
because it then requires us to then do central services, and it adds another complexity. So we are looking to have one that's a true balanced calendar, that you get to benefit from the intercessions, that you get to really benefit from the
Yes.
model,
Right.
and then do one that others could replicate, right?
Absolutely.
That's great, I'm just
Yeah.
thrilled. I can't wait to see it in action, and thank you so much for all your groundwork to make it successful.
Director Regan?
So I am really thrilled to hear this plan as well. And what I'm especially excited about is it seems that your staff is completely on board, and your families for the most part.
As many families as we
And
have.
you have community partners working on it. And I guess
Yes.
the reason this one is so exciting to me is we actually have the funding, and we're committing the fundings to do the intercessions.
Right.
And, yeah, that's huge. And to me, rather than having kids, fall behind all year long and then you try to catch them up in summer school, we actually are having these intercessions right in the middle of the semester. And so the kids hopefully can catch up and not ever get so discouraged that they give up. So to me, it's a huge, wonderful strategy. I'm really, really excited that we're doing it. I had one little thing in terms of the calendar itself that I just wanted to mention, Rudy, to you, which is, if you look at July 2015, so presuming that we start this in July of this summer, you would start
Yes.
it. It looks like the following year, according to the calendar, you would be starting school on a Friday. So I just wanted to have you pay attention to that.
Well, yes, and that was something that we discussed, and one of they would have had a year already of an experience with this, and Tamala believes, and I and Sasha, we all concur, that making that first day back an event, a celebration for families. I'll let her talk more about that. We specifically looked at that as I'll let her do it. Go ahead.
Well, an opportunity to, first of all, celebrate the year, the 14-15 school year, because we know that's going to be a great year. And we thought Friday is kind of a strange day to start school, but if we did that, how could we turn that into something positive? I'm always about making lemonade out of lemons. And so we looked at really this parent engagement. We're fortunate to have Rayco Williams, who used to work with parent engagement at the district office, and that has been a real focus for us to get parents in school, get volunteers in school, get parents really understanding what we're asking of their students, because we know the home and school partnership is incredibly important. So we're gonna take and make some lemonade. We're gonna have a welcome back breakfast. We've already begun thinking about ideas to bring families in, get them in classrooms on the first day, and have that the first couple hours before we settled in, and then use it just as a reminder. They wouldn't have been out of school so as long, so we're hoping that we just go right back in. We do some general kind of activities that day, team building, and then on Monday we're ready to hit the ground running with the first full week of school.
So why wouldn't all of that work doing it on a Monday? And then you just have the rest of the week? So, I mean, this is completely opposite to what we just heard about the regular calendar, that, oh,
Right.
2 days, and then you break it up is
Right.
not good for kids, and now we're saying that 1 day is, and
Right.
I'm
I
getting lost.
think, it's interesting because I do not envy Rudy at all doing calendars, because just adding the 2 days and making things work. When we looked at, okay, we could start, on a Monday, but then at the end of the year, is it more important to end with everybody else, or is it more important, we're beginning school when nobody else is beginning school at this point. But to end when everybody else ends, we just think that it's at the end of the year, and we know our kids are tired, and then and by the way, get up and come 1 or 2 more days, because that's what we would have to do. We have to get those days in there. And so that was our thinking
So it was
around this.
It was from June 2016 back mapping to July 2015 start. is how it
Exactly.
worked
That's what
out.
we did.
Okay.
Well, I guess I would again say that to me, starting strong is more important than when we end.
Mhm.
And so I would be concerned about a Friday. If we're concerned about a Thursday start, we ought to be concerned about a Friday start. So I'm just not following it. So, anyway, I'm enormously supportive in general. That particular little piece doesn't make any sense to me. But.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say welcome. It's good to see you, and I see your husband has joined you. Another late night for him. Family affair. Nothing better to do than to spend nights here at the school board. But thank you. I also just want to reiterate how excited I am. I do think, and Steve, I'd love to talk with you more about year-round school and hear what you've heard, because similar to what you actually just said about how you start with, right, you start fractions at one point and then students forget it another 3 months. I think that's originally the intent behind spiraling curriculum, is that you lose it, or some kids didn't get it and you come back to it again. And that just, as far as I've noticed folks learning, and I believe what research says is the shorter amount of time you come back to revisit that, you have to have some experience, move away from it, and then come back to it. That's what really excites me about year-round. So thank you, and thank you to your staff for being willing to go this. I have to admit that having made a case for not coming in for 1 day and then going, even though there was a holiday break in between the other one, this is a weekend.
Yeah.
That calendaring seems goofy, but thank you. This is great.
So I just had one question, because you've mentioned your families quite a bit and your staff. I'm curious about the outreach to both.
Yes.
And you gave us this, which is wonderful, but it looks like this is going to go out later, right?
That will go out later.
Okay, so
And-
the outreach that you've had, and also the feedback from your staff. You said that they are really excited about it, so if you could
They are excited.
elaborate a little bit on that?
I think the awesome part about the teachers and the staff at Rosa Parks is really about what's best for kids. And so we actually did a survey last year, and we started that. We actually did a survey again at the beginning of this year for new staff. And we had about 4 of our surveys come back out of about, I think we collected about 40. Of course, it wasn't something they had to do. But it wasn't about them not agreeing about the year-round school. The question was, does this work for my family? Does this work for me as an educator? Maybe I have young children. I'm very satisfied with their school, and they're on a different calendar. And I fully and highly respect that, because it was really about the kids. And so again, if they decide, some I've been in one-to-one conversations with, and they're like, I might be able to give this a try and see how it works. And there may be others that just say, as much as I love Rosa Parks and the kids, I need to put my family first. And we are really respectful and okay with that. As far as our families, we've had a variety of focus groups, infinity groups by language. So we have about 130 ESL students, so speaking 18 languages or more. And so we invited in, we had interpreters there for the meetings, and informal meetings, formal meetings, night meetings, day meetings, morning meetings, to reach as many. The work, if approved, when approved, then the work will really begin for us, and then it's about really creating that culture, so when that first day in July comes, that everybody's ready, everybody's knowledgeable, and I'm really committed to make sure my families fully understand. And so translations, you have the English version, but when we roll out the final copy, it'll go in I think we have 4 of the 5 major languages, and it will go in that. But more importantly, we also have people who will be familiar with that and can talk directly to parents and answer questions, because that's huge. So I'm excited about its work, but it's going to be work well spent, because our families do want their children to be able to be the best they can be and be successful in school.
Right. Right. Well, great. I appreciate that.
I was just going to say also that we will be working with the communications department and developing a communications plan. So there's, the robocalls at the beginning to remind people of school and all of that.
Okay. Bobby?
And we'll open up the enrollment and transfer process for any families that don't want to do this.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I would really support, so that families who want to do something different because of our timing would have an opportunity to be able to change. Because I think it's just as important for families that didn't know about the year-round balanced calendar, and they may want to come to Rosa Parks because of that experience. So I think it goes
So we'll
ways.
have opportunities both ways.
I think so.
Good. That's exciting.
Great. Thank you again for coming. Sounds very exciting.
Thank you.
You'll have to come back and tell us how it's going in July.
Absolutely. Maybe August. Thank you.
So I have one more question in general on the calendars.
Yeah.
Carol, I have one more question on the calendar, so. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Actually, let me just
Go ahead.
come right back.
So I think I'll just go ahead and call up David Williams. You want to come on up, David, and talk to us a little bit about a legislative update? And then, Bobby, you can ask your questions about calendars after David's finished.
Thank you, members of the board. David Williams, your Director of Government Relations. You had in your board packet a spreadsheet, sort of looks like that. And I'm going to reserve that for a little bit. So as you know, we've just completed the 2014 February legislative session, which is the legislature's annualized session that they will do every off year, a 35-day short session. When this was created by the voters a number of years ago, it was meant to be a sort of technical session, a budget rebalance if needed, emergency policy issues, etc. Of course, because this session occurs in an election year, that isn't always the case. We tracked about 40 bills during the legislative session, so fairly limited. If you recall, during a full session, we track several hundred bills, so certainly a limited scope. There was 33 days for the full session, and 17 bills affecting education and or PPS specifically were approved by the legislature. So all in all, it was a relatively quiet education-related session. Not to say it wasn't without its bigger issues, things like a certain bridge some marijuana issues, gun control, land use. These are the things that grabbed headlines during this short legislative session. So there were certainly issues they were attempting to tackle, just not headline education issues. The session did, however, signal for us a couple of issues that we think will percolate going into the full session, and this may prove useful for us in the future, as this short session is, in a way, an opportunity for people to float sort of trial balloons for some issues that they want to have bigger debates and or bigger battles about. I think there's two in particular I want to highlight, and I know we'll have much greater discussion about these in the months to come as we begin to think about framing the 2015 legislative platform for the district. One is what I'll call mandate by formula. So, you know, we have the state school fund formula, the way we distribute funding to districts around the state. It is a distribution formula. It's not a directive of how to spend funding. It's merely a distribution model. And as advocates, we've done generally a fairly good job at convincing the legislature to not act as a 90-member school board, to really distribute the funds in the most equitable manner that they see fit, using that formula, and to not pass down mandates without actually adding the funding to go with that. Of course, unfunded mandates, as you call it. So a new model we see floated is this idea to come in and modify the state school fund formula and attach a spending mandate to it. So there was a relatively minor bill dealing with long-term care and treatment that got bogged into this because the proposed solution to what is clearly a funding problem with long-term care and treatment was to move it out of a grant and aid budget and create a 3x weight in the formula and require that 3x weight be all spent on long-term care and treatment programs. A real big fundamental shift. The bill did not gain final approval. It was punted to a work group and sent to the school funding task force, of which Director Regan sits on. So I know she'll be revisiting this issue in that venue as well. But I think that is in, if we extrapolate further, I think that is a vein that we will begin to see more and more in the conversation around how districts spend the money that is handed down from the state. We've seen this conversation percolate in the past, and I think we're going to see it more and more with the state school fund distribution formula, especially with some pretty big pots in there, things like ELL weighting in the formula and special ed weighting in the formula. So I think those are some sort of key things to watch. The other area of signaling was around the renewal of the Oregon Education Investment Board, the OEIB. There were a couple of bills in the session that would have added specific slots for members on the OEIB. One bill created a slot for a school board member, required the governor to appoint a school board member to the OEIB. Another bill required a certain number of members of the OEIB to be certificated educators, whether that be teachers or administrators, was unclear in the bill. But to create these sort of slot-based models, the governor made it very clear he would veto those bills if they ever got to him. The bills did not get to him. But they engendered this conversation among legislators about why should we be talking about remaking the board when we aren't even having that conversation about whether or not to extend that. As you may know, the OEIB sunsets in 2016, which means the 2015 session will be the big debate about whether or not to extend the work of the OEIB. So I think that there was a bit of a simmering battle, if you will, in that conversation about whether or not to renew the OEIB. And I think those are some interesting conversations that will be brought forth in the 2015 session. So two trial balloons that we saw come up. We did see some smaller issues carry the day for education, some minor modifications to the interdistrict transfer statutes to try to deal with some hardship issues among students, a small pot of money for targeted for specific schools that are, let's call it focus and priority like schools. Unfortunately, the qualifications in the bill, PPS school, there is no PPS school that fits that qualification, but there's only $500,000 allocated to about a total of 19 schools, not 500 each, but to be split amongst them. Some modifications to proficiency grading. You may recall we've had these conversations about House Bill 2220 in the past. There was a bill, House Bill 4150, that was brought that clarified the requirements in House Bill 2220, and as well basically clarified that if districts were going to go to a more proficiency-based grading system, that they have to incorporate educators into the creation of that process by either creating a specific committee with a specific makeup in the bill, or tasking an existing committee like the Achievement Compact Committees or others with this task. And I know that this is, our folks working on this are keenly aware of the bill and have incorporated this into their work. And as well, a bill dealing with Native American imagery and mascots in schools. This was a very big topic. Essentially, the legislature created an NCAA-like exemption to the process, much like the Florida State Seminoles have an exemption from the NCAA to be able to use that as a mascot because of their agreement with the Seminole tribe. This will create a similar exemption process in Oregon for districts that want to get an agreement with one of the 9 federally recognized tribes in the state of Oregon to use Native American imagery in their mascots. As you may know, PPS did introduce 2 measures in this session. One, Senate Bill 1538, which was a redraft of a bill we had during the full session, modifying charter school application process. The good news is this is a bill that got a majority vote in both the House and the Senate. The bad news is those weren't in the same session. So the bill did not receive support this session for final approval, and we'll revisit that going forward. The next bill, House Bill 4009, deals with the program of providing education services to students at the Providence Child Center. This is an issue that came up at the very end of the last full session that we did a stopgap, plugged the hole, got a work group together, and really created a great consensus agreement around funding this program. Essentially, the nutshell of it is the state will take responsibility for all of these students and will contract with Portland Public Schools to deliver the education services. So no individual district will be claiming these kids for ADM or high-cost disabilities account, et cetera, et cetera. They will simply take money off the state school fund to pay for this program in its entirety. Now, as you may know, the issue, of course, is that more than half of these kids are not residents of Portland Public Schools, including some residents out of state. Yet Portland Public Schools for quite a while had been simply providing the services as if they were. So we really think this was a great consensus approach. So then now we just look forward to 2015. I know there's going to be lots of issues, and I know in the months to come I'll be working with the co-chairs to develop a process and figure out how we want to develop a legislative platform and go forward to that session. Of course, in the intervening time, we have an election. As a public employee in a representative district, I have no opinion on that election whatsoever, but certainly as an observer, there'll be lots of interesting conversations during that election and potentially changing landscapes going into into 2015. You do have the spreadsheet listing every single bill from the session. Because there were only a handful of them, I'm able to put them on 3 whopping pages. If there are questions about specific ones or anything we covered, I'd be happy to answer those.
So who has questions?
I had just one question on HB 4063. And I'm just trying to understand what the intent here was. Establishes a task force on statutory common school fund loans to identify opportunities for making loans from the common school fund for the purpose of financing projects that provide significant in-state economic benefits. So,
what's that?
Yeah.
So, great question.
It just worries me to make loans from the common school fund.
So House Bill 4063 was a bill brought by Representative Lou Frederick. It was originally a bill to allow the common school fund to provide loans for Superfund cleanup work. So the Common School Fund, a little bit of background, the Common School Fund is not the state school fund. These are different things, and often they get interchanged in conversation. The Common School Fund is a pot of money and assets that is primarily made up of state timber lands that were deeded to the state at the time of statehood from the federal government. A big piece being the Elliott State Forest. There's often been a lot of conversation around appropriate yields on the Elliott State Forest. The Common School Fund gets the proceeds from any work on the Elliott State Forest. The Common School Fund is also filled with money from unclaimed property. So you left $2 in a bank account that you closed when you were in college and forgot about it. Well, that money's in the Common School Fund, and we're getting the interest off of that and providing that to school districts. There's an annual distribution from the Common School Fund that goes out to all school districts in the state. The Common School Fund makes a lot of loans in a lot of variety of ways to try to maximize the return on that pot of funds. And Representative Frederick felt there was a restriction that could perhaps loosen up some funds that would both return investment as well as do some economic good to the state. And what we ended up with out of the session was a task force to look at really what are those and what are appropriate ways to close some of those loopholes.
And do you have any sense on HB 4087, the Task Force on School Safety? Is there an opportunity for a Portland Public School representative on that?
So the Task Force on School Safety is not, that sounds very broad. It's not a broad issue. So the Task Force on School Safety is really charged with looking at, the bill was originally requiring school districts to send blueprints of all school buildings to a state repository so that state and local so that state and local law enforcement would have access to them should the need arise in a situation where they were responding to a school situation. I think obviously the fear is an active shooter situation where state and local law enforcement may not have the ability to get access to the facilities department of the district to get the blueprints. Obviously, there are some concerns that we might have about positing all of blueprints in one specific location in a state online database that may or may not have the kind of security we need for that kind of piece of information. So this is a task force that will look at what is the best way to do this. Is it to make sure that districts have the right kind of relationship with local law enforcement so that local law enforcement know how to get that information when needed, or is it back to some sort of state repository as well?
So this really isn't the broader issue?
It really is not the broader issue of school safety, very focused. There is specific makeup of the task force, and I believe there is representative from each of the major education advocacy groups in the state, so OSBA, COSA, OEA, OSCA as well, will all be represented on that task force.
Could you send me this so I could share it?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think this did go out electronically in the board packet. I'll be happy to pull it out separately and send it to you, for sure.
So I get it online so I can share it online
Sure,
to people.
absolutely.
I have a lot of people, friends who are real interested in it, and maybe to my home email, that's
Be happy
better.
to.
Thank you, David.
Okay.
Actually, the only other thing I'd like to add is just recognizing David for his presence on our behalf at the legislature, but also he is part of a team that comes and keeps the entire COSA, so 197 districts across the state. We have a team of people of which David is a part, and that tries to have everybody understand what the implications of this are and have us acting as a body more effectively in the legislature. So I just want to say thank you for that, because it's totally, I think, made a difference to have a more unified presence during these sessions. So thank you.
And did you, Director Bile?
Yeah. It's probably too early to predict. As you pointed out, we have an election coming up to know how the body is going to change, the legislative body. But can you talk a little bit about the sense I keep saying about funding? So my understanding is part of the reason why our state legislature funded second year of the biennium more than the first was because it sets a different starting platform for where they consider for 2015-17. So one, can you talk a little bit about what you're hearing or how we might most effectively advocate, keeping in mind, and I know you have this in mind, but I'm saying it just for a general public, that my understanding is that if the legislature took cost of living increases and funded whatever that new level was, and then they increased the funding by $250 million, that alone would essentially pay for our portion of a fully weighted kindergarten, which is a state mandate starting in 2015. So I'm worried that the state legislature is going to say, we've increased by $250 million, and really what they've done is honored their commitment to full-day kindergarten without really effectively increasing the ability to spend on class size or whatever else that the case may be. Can you talk a little bit about funding, and then I have one more.
So, of course, it's never too early to make predictions. It's just the level of accuracy is called into question when you make them this early. So I think the funding landscape has a couple of variables to keep in mind as we head towards next session. So one is obviously economic recovery. All signs point to a fairly steady but slow economic recovery for the state. This is both good and bad. Bad, of course, because a more robust recovery means greater income tax collections for the state, which means a greater ability to distribute those funds. It is good because a greater recovery would potentially trigger the kicker. We are projected not to have a kicker, however, it will be close. If we maintain a slow, steady recovery, there will not be a potential kicker this next year, but if there is a sudden spike in recovery or something like that, I think you are looking at a kicker, and obviously that does diminish the capacity as it creates a ratcheting effect on state revenues. So I think that's an important piece to keep in mind. As well, the risk factor of a downturn in the economy. That would obviously be a big problem. So that as we look to next session, I think, and we saw this, Carol mentioned COSA and their funding coalition and Off the Record folks had a very robust conversation about this a couple of weeks ago in how do we frame that funding picture going into next session when you are talking about, you've got a full-day kindergarten sort of mandate coming online, but essentially an equivalent of $250 million. Yet still making sure that is outside of what is an otherwise roll-up budget, and yet still then, how do you make the debate and how do you make the case for increased investment on top of all of those things? So those, I don't have a good answer for how the best to frame that. The conversations are active and ongoing. I think the more we continue to talk about what needs to be done and what we can do and what we have done. So a big piece of this is going to be how we as a state education system collectively sort of respond to the fact that the legislature did increase the budget by nearly $1 billion this last session. So that's a huge step forward. Now, we can make all kinds of arguments about how that $1 billion is still a relatively short step given increasing in cost of living, increase in healthcare, increase in PERS, all kinds of cost factors that are outside of our control. But nonetheless, it's a very significant step forward. So beginning to have that conversation about, okay, here's what we were able to do with that small step. Think about what we can do with continuing to take steps forward. You're not going to take the big step. We're certainly not going to get all the way there. But continuing to take those steps forward so that we can make sustained and valuable investments in program. The kindergarten is a good one, and that certainly will allow us to have a conversation about specific program. There is a fine line to walk when we have that conversation too, because we don't want it to teeter into the legislature is going to fund a grade level. So they're going to fund kindergarten specifically. Then that becomes more of a spending mandate from the state. So I think those are some of the challenges we face in that conversation. The other piece, of course, is in working with the legislature and folks like the Legislative Fiscal Office and the School Revenue Forecast Committee. These are technical pieces, but going into last legislative session, you remember the governor came out with his proposed budget, which was, we won't even mention the number, because it was really, really below what we finally got approved. And one of the problems is because he based that on a roll-up forecast that was built into the School Revenue Forecast Committee. Well, the problem with that roll-up forecast is the state, when it does it, assumes that every dollar being spent today is an ongoing dollar. It's an ongoing revenue stream, where districts are patching things together with days and reserves and other one-time funding
Federal
sources,
money.
et cetera, et cetera. Federal money, all kinds of different patched dollar sources to get us where we are today. Those dollars don't roll up, right? So that's why you had that anomaly, because you had really a big amount of one-time funding. So being able to work with those sort of technical parts of the process as well, so that when the governor and the legislature get the foundational data they need to build their budget, they're building it off of the same set of facts. We can debate opinion, we can't debate facts. We gotta make sure the fact is right first, and then we can debate the opinion about how big the budget bump needs to be above that.
Okay.
I'm going to skip my second question, but I'll just mention that obviously with the Department of Education ruling about what the 130 hours means, it sounds like many metro area and perhaps statewide school districts had an interpretation that allowed proficiency, but that's going to have to play because it sounds like very few districts are meeting that, if any.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I know there are one or two that are, so I shouldn't say that, but how many? But obviously that's partly a budgetary decision as to why they're not meeting those hours. But My last question, and you just touched on it a little bit, as you pointed out, federal. We did lose money last year. You pointed out in your budget that our equity allocation, what that allowed us to do is schools that got Title I or federal dollars cut didn't see as big of a cut because we backfilled or we filled in with our equity allocation. We differentiated resources for the students who needed it the most, which is absolutely appropriate. Can you talk a little bit about at the federal level what we need to do to begin to see a reinvestment in those dollars? And how we might help you?
How long are we going to be?
As a
3 minutes or less.
As a public employee, I have
2
no
minutes.
comments on election results. I think that Congress is a much more challenging beast for us to tackle. I think that you look at legislative session passing 17 bills affecting education in 33 days. That's just not the kind of progress you see on the federal level. And obviously most of this is policy related, but even when it comes to money related issues, I think while Oregon's economy is experiencing a slow, steady recovery, I think we can expect federal grant programs to experience significantly slower growth. I think you're just really looking at a flatlined approach for the time being.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. David, thank you very much. I also, for our viewing audience, will mention that you are about to lead a group of us to the Council of Great City Schools in Washington, D.C., starting on Friday, including Student Representative Davidson and 2 other Super SAC students. So we're very excited about the fact that they're going to go to that with us.
We use the term
And
lead very loosely.
Lead, chaperone, how about that? Of course, there we'll have the opportunity to find out more about the federal funding and what's happening on the federal front, and also what's happening in our other urban school districts. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for your hard work in the legislature. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Bobby. Yep.
So I had one final question on the calendars, and specifically this is on the draft resolution, which would be the adoption of the calendar for next year and the following year and instructional hours. It goes through recitals including D, which talks about the continuation of 16 hours of professional development delivered during 8 2-hour late opening sessions, so that's 16 hours. What I'm curious about is in the resolution part, it looks like you're asking us to agree to a reduction of instructional time for students by up to 30 hours in order to conduct teacher professional development. Can you help me understand what that is?
And actually, I'll let Amanda do this. She's been working on this. Go for it.
The instructional hours statute allows us to do up to 30 hours for professional development counted toward our 990. As I mentioned earlier, we did meet previously our 990 instructional hours, but as you know, it was very close and we're adding days here. This is by statute, allows us slightly more flexibility, and it's an up to 30 in order to count toward instructional hours. Not that we would go for less instructional hours, but that we would be able to count these professional development hours that would take us above where we are now. What this also addresses is the schools, the focus and priority schools, such as that where Superintendent Smith has recommended adding 2 additional professional development days there. That would allow these to also count for those instructional hours.
And we have the capacity to add up to 3 of those days. And the professional development is counts toward the 990, but not you
toward the
don't
130.
count when you're counting the 130. So so 2 different calculations.
So I thought, I was under the impression that with our priority schools, we were adding back instructional days that had been used for professional development, and that the professional development days would be added on top of that, which would not have anything to do with instructional time for students. We never were going to use those for instructional time. So why are we being asked to add 30 hours? Why aren't we just doing the 16?
This allows us to continue to count those as instructional hours per the statute. So it's not that we're asking for less instructional hours for students, it's allowing us to add more instructional hours by counting professional development hours as part of those instructional hours.
So could you reword this?
Sure.
Could you just say that this would allow us to add more instructional hours.
Okay.
If you're asking me to approve a resolution that reduces instructional time for students by another 30 hours, I'm really not interested in voting yes on that.
And that's not what we're asking.
I
So,
know it's
yeah.
not.
Okay.
And so if you could maybe reword that, it would be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
I
Andrew.
just wanted to quickly say that our standardized testing forum that I've talked about before on Thursday has actually been postponed until a later date because of scheduling issues. So I will have details coming forward after spring break about that. But it is happening.
So not March 20th?
Not March
Not March
20th.
Not a conflict.
So, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
All
thanks.
right, the next meeting of the board will be held on March 31st, 2014. This meeting is now adjourned.